Reculture study session so that we are leaning in, office-like style, digging in as learners and students, that we are going to try to narrow our topics to really one deep discussion where the expertise of many and the interdependence of many comes to the table. I want to thank Dr. Potensky, Matt, for encouraging this and at our last retreat, our first retreat, second study session in-ish. We dubbed enrollment and the surrounding topics of enrollment as a priority among all of us. So this will be our first time doing that. However, our agenda is squeezing in one other topic. And I say squeezing in not belittlingly, but because I want to honor the intention of reculturating and see if we like it and how this works for us. So we will also be hearing a first read, and we can ask our questions later. We can ask our questions now if we want to take some of the time to do that now, that's fine. But we want to really aim for the bulk of our time to be about enrollment. So my apologies to those who have worked so hard on the social science curriculum. And then I know you have about 13 slides to share with us this evening, and then we stand ready for a deeper conversation when we put it on the agenda for second read. And the reason it's time sensitive is because May 13th is the procurement date for materials, whatever the decision is. Yes? Okay. So I will ask to have approval of the agenda as presented. I need I'll motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We will go to superintendent comments.
Just a few quick celebratory notes. Tomorrow morning, Cherokee Elementary will be holding its 50th birthday party. That'll begin at 9 o'clock, and I am sure that the program will be an exciting and uplifting one, and if your schedule permits, I'd encourage you to pop in and enjoy that. Secondly, the week of May 5th through May 9th is Teacher Appreciation Week, and since our next meeting is on May 13th, I want to make sure that it's on everybody's radar. We know that there are a lot of events scheduled for next week to make sure that our teachers know just how much we value them, but I wanted to also make sure the governing board was aware that that's happening. We'll have many year-end celebrations at our meeting on May 13th because it's the last meeting while school's still in session, and we have a lot of things that kind of come together at the same time. But this week I received information on the number of students who received the Seal of Biliteracy. And just to kind of share with you the progression we've had over the last 4 years, in 2022, 120 students earned the seal. In 23, 150. In 24, 175, and this year, 229 students have received the Seal of Biliteracy. So we have close to doubled the number of students earning that designation on their diploma. We have other students that have received other seals. We'll celebrate those as well, but that's new information that came in today, and I wanted to share that with all of you. Two other things that are coming up, both tomorrow night. The Arcadia Beach volleyball team will be playing for a state championship at Castile High School tomorrow night. And at the same time, we will be celebrating the newest class of Coronado Promise Scholarship recipients at 6 p.m. So we look forward to both of those being really great opportunities to acknowledge the success of our students, and we wish the Arcadia Titans well as they compete for a state championship. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. All right, we're ready to begin now with the first read, the 13 slides that are going to be presented to us on social science curriculum adoption. Leah?
Great, thank you so much. I would like to welcome Dr. Dodds-Karen and Mr. Bullard, who are going to share an overview of the work of the committee, as well as the recommendations for the first read for social science courses.
And I don't know, I'm wondering,
Is that it there?
Yeah,
it's the PDF. Oh, there they go.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna just check my handy dandy clicker.
And speak into the mic because people won't be able to hear you.
I'm just gonna check my clicker to see how it works. Okay, perfect, it works greatly from here. All right, well, good evening, Board President Lewis, Vice President Sharkey, members of our board, those sitting around this table, and all in the audience with us this evening. I am proud to be joined this evening with Dylan Bullard, our social studies curriculum coach, to present to you the work of the Social Science Curriculum Adoption Committee. We are presenting to you the recommendations that have emerged from the evaluation process, specifically for world history, world geography, American and Arizona history, AP World History Modern, AP Human Geography, and AP United States History. The work of this committee was grounded in our strategic plan. The goal of the committee was to review and to evaluate curriculum, instructional materials to bring forward a recommendation to you, the governing board. During our first committee meeting, we reviewed our strategic plan, and what is brought before you this evening aligns with our strategic plan, specifically with goals for academic excellence and optimized resources. It's very important to us that we challenge our students, we inspire our students to achieve high academic levels of success, and we want to ensure that opportunities afforded in our system prepare them for their post-secondary education and careers. Additionally, we are committed to providing resources to our schools and our teachers and our students so that they have all the tools they need for success. SUSD is grateful for the steadfast support of our community through capital override initiatives. We recognize the responsibility for this fiscal stewardship, and we take it very seriously. The curriculum adoption process is influenced by several key factors, including budget, educational needs, alignment with state standards, requirements of College Board exams. Recently, we initiated this curriculum adoption to secure as well advanced placement curriculum materials to ensure alignment with adjustments to assessments. So the College Board often will adjust their assessments, and we also want to make sure that we are preparing our teachers with the resources they need for a new course that the governing board approved during our high school planning guide process for AP Human Geography. It's worth noting that our last comprehensive high school social studies curriculum adoption was held in 2007. Since then, we have relied on supplemental materials to maintain standards-aligned curriculum. The Arizona standards for social science also changed in 2018. This is a pivotal time for us in our school district to procure these resources, and we wanted to ensure through a very thorough and a thorough selection process that this committee would review and recommend curriculum for the 5 courses that you see before you here today. I see in the audience one committee member who is present with us this evening. So one of our teachers, Ashley Croce, who as a governing board, you are familiar with Ashley. He's often at the podium receiving an accolade for his expertise and his passion for teaching. But thank you, Ashley, for serving on our committee. As you can see here, there were 7 members on this committee. Collectively, the teachers represented 55 years of teaching experience. We had 2 nationally board certified teachers, an administrator, and a community member. If we weren't sitting right here at this table, and I would encourage you or members of the public to click on the link that is found here on this slide. And the reason we included this link was to acquaint folks with the platforms where we provide all materials related to our curriculum adoptions. It's important to us as a committee that we honor not only state statutes related to curriculum and procurement, but also open meeting law. So by clicking on that website, this will take you to our committee site for under district committees for an active committee in progress, specifically for social science. Also present in the audience this evening is Stephen Paluch. Stephen works in our communications department, and he is a partner to our team to ensure that all of our materials are posted to our website. There are 2 websites. There is the committee website, but then there is a mirror. For everything that Stephen posts on our committee site, it mirrors to a textbook adoption site as well. But on that site, what you can find is committee information for the application. That application launched December 6th. You also will see the members that were selected for our committee, the 7 that I presented on the last slide, as well as on the right-hand side, when you're there are dates. You click on the yellow plus sign, and that unfolds our agendas, our PowerPoints, any resources that were passed out to the members during their review processes, as well as our meeting minutes. Those can be found there. We also include all of the materials that are on display for public review. And board members Carney and Werner have experienced a lot of curriculum adoptions with me over the last few years. And we know that when we get a lot of material, the entire room gets filled and a community member walks in and is like, where do I begin? And that's how our committee feels too. But they have months to review it all. So when a member of the public comes, they might come for an hour or 2 or 3 or 4, so it can seem overwhelming. So based on feedback we've received, we have also added to our website when we eliminate product. And there are different reasons that we eliminate product. If you're on our website, you'll see a strike through immediately. There was curriculum submitted that didn't align to the Arizona standards. So we knew there was no point in spending time with that. But then throughout the process, we update that. And we just want to communicate that so that everybody is aware that while we recognize there's a lot there, we greatly value the opportunity for that public display for that 60-day review. I'm now going to pass the clicker on over to Dylan, who is going to share more of the details of the work of the committee specific to the rubrics, the consensus process, and the ultimate recommendations for the 5 courses.
Can I ask a question real quick before we move on? President Lewis, I don't see a parent on the committee. So you had the 7 people, 55 years of teaching, all great, but why was there no parent on there?
Board Member Carney, we had 7 applicants for this committee. We accepted all 7 applicants. The community member that applied and was selected represents the Desert Mountain Learning Community. We work hard at trying to recruit folks to serve on our committees, and so we had teacher and administrator representation from 3 of our high schools. We did not have any representation from the Arcadia High School, and for that community member with students who matriculated through SUSD with background in social science, they were selected as our Desert Mountain representative.
And last, did you email out the link letting everybody know that the committee was going to be posted? So it went to everyone?
So our recruitment processes always are hosted on our committee site. All of our teachers and staff received an email, and all employees in our newsletters received it. During the December 10th governing board meeting, Dr. Menzel was kind enough to include in his superintendent comments the recruitment had begun for our curriculum adoption committee. But other than that, I have received feedback from a community member. One evening, Dylan will tell you a little bit about public review. A community member was requesting that perhaps we use Peach Jar. I connected with Christine to see if I could use Peach Jar or Parent Square, but that limits just to people who have signed up for notifications. So we're always trying to figure out ways to promote our adoption committees. Most recently, because we don't get a lot of applicants, we utilize Scottsdale Parent Council for our math curriculum adoption committee, where we were able to, we've had consistently 4 parents participate in our math adoption committee this year.
Okay, so unless you're going on the page and looking at the committee page, you will not know. If you're just a parent, you would not know that this was up.
Other than a superintendent comment or perhaps
Or watch the board meetings. Okay.
board meetings, we post flyers at schools as well. So we have curriculum adoption flyers. We've created a series of templates that we just consistently use, but we change out the meat for the curriculum adoption. So flyers at schools and in this case, the superintendent comments.
I'd just like to add, because I had asked you this, because I've been along the journey with the curriculum adoption committees. And as a board member, like, we're not even told when a committee begins. So I think that somehow the board member should at least know that that's starting, because I know to just go randomly on the site and look, and then I say, oh, there's a math curriculum committee starting. I mean, that's how I find it. Like, we've got to do better in getting it out to people, and at least the board members knowing. So then I can promote it to people at least. I think that's easy enough to do.
Thank you.
Okay, one of the first tasks of the committee involved the development of a rubric to be used when analyzing and evaluating curricular material. Creating rubrics as a committee allowed the group to consider characteristics of the materials that are important for students and teachers in our district. The rubric created by the committee includes 4 sections: accuracy and alignment to standards, ease of use and support, engagement and ability to meet student needs, and assessment tools. For every adoption, public viewing is set up and feedback is collected. Public viewing of course materials is held at Oak Campus. In alignment with state statute, public display is available for a 60-day review. Public review opened on February 19th and will remain open until May 13th. As the committee evaluated and eliminated resources, curriculum products were removed from our public display. This is a process our teaching and learning team has improved to ensure visitors utilize their time efficiently, as it can be daunting to see so many products. It's very important for the board and the community to understand that the committee valued and took public feedback into consideration. The first pieces of feedback were received and reviewed by the committee during the March 5th meeting. New and existing feedback was shared at every meeting thereafter. This helped the committee members gain insight into what others were noticing about the curriculum and allowed for further discussion and evaluation of the products. To date, 25 people have signed into the public viewing space since it opened. 65 entries have been collected on the public viewing feedback form. Specifically, 29 comments were provided by people who visited public display at Oak. Public display is open during school hours, but we also host people by appointment. Dr. Dodds Karen worked with a community member to coordinate a group review on the evening of March 17th. And we want to thank the public, our teachers, and members of our board for taking the time to contribute to this process, visit the public display, and provide feedback. After evaluating curriculum and learning more about our top products, the committee used consensus decision-making to arrive at our final recommendation. This is a process that the teaching and learning team committed to developing for consistent use across district committees. It was critical to have this process in place so that all voices were heard and that the committee would accomplish its goal of submitting recommended materials to the governing board for approval. This slide illustrates the curriculum we are recommending for 5 of our high school courses. And these include, for our World History, World Geography, World History, Voyages of Exploration, published by Cengage. For American and Arizona History, U.S. History Interactive, published by Savas. For AP World History Modern, The Earth and Its Peoples, A Global History, published by Cengage. For AP Human Geography, A Spatial Perspective, also published by Cengage. And for AP United States History, A Fabric of a Nation, published by Bedford, Freeman, and Worth. This slide illustrates common themes and criteria considered during the committee's consensus-making process. Always central to the work of this committee was alignment with AP course descriptions and College Board approved material, state standards, a comprehensive suite of resources to meet the needs of all learners, digital integration with our learning management system, and professional development to support teachers. To support this recommendation, we are requesting $674,542.13 to purchase teacher and student materials inclusive of professional development and AP course exam preparation materials. We realize we're requesting a lot of product. However, these resources have the potential to impact over 20,000 students over the next 7 years. This slide illustrates the implementation and support steps that will begin pending board approval. This pattern for implementation is a common process for the work of the teaching and learning team. Similar to the elementary ELA adoption, we'd like to finish the school year with scheduled visits to each high school to meet with social studies teachers and APs of Ed Services in order to introduce the new curriculum. This will not be formal professional development, but rather roundtable discussions to share the newly adopted materials and plans for implementation, including what you see on the slide. Formal professional development through AP Summer Institute, available for teachers to attend locally in Gilbert, Paradise Valley, or online, as the Tucson Summer Institute is only offering virtual sessions this year. Professional development opportunities will also be available during pre-week when all teachers are back on contract. Throughout the year, I will have the opportunity to collaborate with our social studies teachers through coaching and classroom walkthroughs with building leaders. As we become familiar with the curriculum, we will adjust program pacing and design curriculum maps to best serve our teachers and our students. Additionally, we will receive the product by June 30th, which is when the cataloging and barcoding process will begin. This is important not only for our budget, but also for ensuring materials are in our high school bookstores and ready for teachers and students when they return to school in July and August. And this concludes our first read.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Other questions from the board? Karen, Amy, Matt, Mike?
Do the rubric scores get published or posted?
Rubric scores are not published. We could happily provide them to you. Teachers on the committee, members of the committee, complete a paper rubric score, and then we enter them into a Google form so that we can run the pivot tables. What we do not do in our consensus decision-making process is we don't rank them. So we'll see where points fall. So we identify, maybe somebody thought this was an awesome resource, but perhaps the assessment tools were lacking. So then we dive back into that and we discuss, can we do it with this? Do we have other things that we could, or does that eliminate the resource? But we could happily provide
I
those
don't need it. I'm
rubric
just curious
scores.
the methodology of
Yeah.
how it's done.
Other questions by the board? Karen?
Board Member Carney beat me to it. Go.
Oh,
No, I'll go after, mine's quick.
I was gonna say mine's not gonna be quick.
No, you're good.
Okay. I just want to say thank you to the teachers and everybody that's involved in the work in this committee, because I know this is quite the lift. I've taken a lot of time to read through the public feedback, and there's several concerns about the Savas U.S. History selection that people noted, and I also personally was able to go and review this curriculum. I think I was the first person to actually go, and it's true, it was very overwhelming in there with all of those options. But Savas was one of the ones that I had reviewed myself, and reading the feedback from people. I'm a bit surprised that we chose Savas, as they're known to be a publisher with political bias and very focused on activism. And we had issues with their ELA curriculum that was adopted several years ago, and that proves to be true in this curriculum as well. So I want to know about the online version of this curriculum. I saw much concerning bias content and Hook and Inspire and ListenWise. So for instance, for an example, Hook and Inspire's connections to today's support, take action to inform people about modern protest movements, says to share the video March March by the Chicks and to discuss what they're confronting. Is this something that the committee reviewed? Did they review all the videos that are included in this?
Similar to our curriculum adoption processes for any of our resources, when there are things such as Hook and Inspire, ListenWise, if there are recommended supplemental materials, novels, we always go through a review process to embed those into our curriculum maps. So with our ELA curriculum adoption for secondary, we did tap into the ListenWise and the Hook and Inspire to identify if there were anything of concern. We also learned in that process too, with the ListenWise, that might take you to an outside platform. And so when going to, say, YouTube, we want to make sure that teachers are teeing up the lesson just as it is intended for that clip, because the Hook and Inspire is truly intended to do that. Hook and inspire for the discussion. So we have not reviewed every single podcast or video. That is part of the curriculum mapping process.
Okay, so we would approve this curriculum, and then they would go through another approval process for the supplementals that come with this?
Our practice has been that when we add them in, we do bring forward. We listen to the ListenWise and the Hook and Inspire for our Savas ELA, and we built those into the curriculum. We did not bring those to the governing board as additions into, because the board had adopted the curriculum, and we utilized our teachers, our coaches, and the alignment to standards to build those into our maps.
Okay, so another concerning section is take action by learning about civil rights actions today. There's several things that are featured in there, but One, social media helps Black Lives Matter fight the power. Campaign Zero, which states we can live in a world beyond policing, shrink the reliance and power of the police. Another one on there is the Movement for Black Lives, ending systemic racism and disproportionate police violence against communities of color. Invite your students to explore these websites and the vision and policy solutions they put forward. We believe that prisons, police, and all other institutions that inflict violence on Black people must be abolished. We are anti-capitalist. I could go on, but I'm highly concerned about the negative rhetoric against police in this curriculum, and the idolatry with protesting is throughout this as well. So when you look at the public review comments, I don't know, a couple times in here I see somebody writes, this is exactly what parents do not want for their children and is why they're moving out of the public school. If you care about maintaining or increasing enrollment, this will not help. So I don't know if the other board members read this, but that's exactly what we said our goal is, right? And this, to me, doesn't meet those standards. So I'm a little concerned that, did the committee look at the feedback and these, kind of biased curriculum, and how did we not, how are we still saying this is what's best for our students?
I'm happy to provide to the governing board a memo that can show the point, counterpoint, the balance of perspective within the units aligned to standards and the instructional goals of the different units. Happy to do that, to show the different perspectives that are shared so that students can have opportunities for critical thinking discussion to draw conclusions. So happy to provide that if the board would like to see the comparison information within a unit to build student understanding. We appreciate that concern. And I will echo your question of, did the committee consider it? Absolutely. Every committee meeting, and you can see this reflected in our meeting minutes, the committee reviewed the feedback. The committee then would look at the curriculum. They would look for the evidence. I specifically remember at one point there was a concern for too many pictures in the book. And one of our teachers said, we teach 15-year-olds. They're learning about things that they've never experienced. They need the pictures to understand what's going on. And so we do a very thorough review to understand comprehensively the best we can of what the curriculum entails.
Okay, lastly, I'm not sure exactly what this is, but someone shared that the teacher's edition includes problematic standard categories on culturally relevant learning, my story and current event videos and listen-wise, integrating social and emotional learning, and creating a trauma-informed classroom. So there just seems like a lot here that is concerning, and I'm just wanting to, I'm just concerned that this is not going to be something that everyone is looking for. And like I said, if that was our goal, if that's our goal, I don't know how this meets the goal.
Happy to provide
Thank you.
some response in a memo.
Karen? Okay. Matt, were you moving your mic to talk? Mike? No. Okay. I have some questions I may send your way for the second read, but related to adoption cycles in general, and the budget-based support for that within our budget. The asking in general, did the ADE change standards since our last adoption? I'm sure they're aligned. I just was curious what the changes and modifications might be. And in what way, you mentioned literature or novels. I was curious in what other way integration of resources was occurring. I don't need an answer tonight.
Okay. Great.
Thanks for your transparency. Good job.
Actually, I just want to make sure I understand what you're offering to prepare. So I think there's two concerns. One is, in an internet age, something links to something, links to something, links to something. And so how many degrees deep into any curriculum are you able to reasonably go, recognizing that there still could be links embedded in links embedded in links? And your answer there was, you look at the main text, and then you look at kind of the second order of resources, things like podcasts or what have you. And then there's always the possibility that that then may reference something else, and there's only so far you can go. I'm trying to put words in your mouth, and then I want to make sure I understand the second answer. But on the review scope, is that the way you think about it, that there's degrees of distance from the core text?
Beyond the core text and curriculum recommended to support the lessons, if it were something that, say I'm listening to something and they make reference to the lady in the yellow floral shirt, that would require the student to go pursue the lady in the yellow floral shirt as a topic. That is not part of the learning objective that the teacher is engaging the students in the learning experience. So we have some tech tools that we use within our classrooms, like a classroom relay system where teachers can monitor where kids are going on their computers. But our work is aligned with what is the learning outcome that we are working toward.
So
what
you're reviewing
resources.
the primary materials associated with the learning objectives.
Correct.
And if there's other things that are meant to enrich it, that's where you have to draw some boundaries and how far you go with your review.
Correct.
And then on the second, in offering the board the balanced perspectives memo, am I understanding you correctly that what you're saying is our goal isn't necessarily to avoid our students being exposed to things that we might disagree with or any member of our community? The measure is whether there are other perspectives too. And so if you came from a politically progressive, you may read things that would upset you if you just singled those out. And if you came from a politically conservative household, you might. And so what you're guiding us to look at is not whether there's any one of these, but whether on balance, there's a diverse set of perspectives so that students are challenged and can think it through.
Correct.
Okay. And that's what the memo will do, is show us,
Some
okay.
exemplars.
Thank you. I would
Thank
find
you.
that valuable.
We look forward to the memo. And in terms of subscription-based renewals, is that embedded in the budget? And then you can answer that next meeting.
Sure.
But as opposed to fixed, single assets, but consumables, just for my clarity. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Thank you. You guys may go home if your boss lets you. May they go home?
They may go.
Okay.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for your hard work. All right, that brings us to our enrollment study. And I want to remind us that we had a good conversation at our retreat, that this was something we all see as important. I know it's in our strategic planning goals. This is not an implications phase discussion. This is a grounding, foundational conversation, so we can all get on the same page with the data that helps keep us curious and wondering, and as we ask questions, rather than anything that would be blame or shame oriented, we want to study what might be the patterns and what are the variables maybe within our control, what are the variables that may be outside of our control, and take a look at what we have. If what we have is not enough or there's something else we want to do, we might want to pursue follow-up. I think there's the second conversation coming up about this topic. But I'm going to actually turn it over to Dr. Menzel for an introduction, and then Matt, I'd like you to introduce, since this really is a conversation starter that I think initiated with you, with the board. So if you're comfortable with that, let's have Dr. Menzel start, and then you chime in comfortably.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lewis, and members of the board and members of my team. As you know, one of our wildly important goals this year related to enrollment. We know that our financial engine's driven by the number of students that we have and their implications when ADM is declining every year and our overall enrollment has been declining. So the opportunity to do a deep dive into what the trends have been, not just over the last 3 or 4 years, but over the last few decades, and thinking about what are the factors that are within our control, what are the outside factors that have impacted what's going on that may be outside of our control, so that we have a level playing field with respect to what the implications are for future decision-making. So as President Lewis said, tonight's not to talk about those implications. Tonight's to make sure that we're clear on the data. And Dr. Bachna has done an amazing job in taking all of the data and putting it into visually accessible formats. And all the members of the team around the table here have spent a lot of time reviewing the data, talking about what else do we need to have. And there are other corollary conversations that can happen. So from a marketing perspective, we have a lot of data that's not in the slideshow. We have information on our facilities that we can go deeper in. So as we go through the conversation, if there are things that you as a board want to know more about, some of the data we may have already available, others that we can pull together. But what we're really hoping to do tonight is to present the information, create opportunities for what we've called notice and wonder. When you're looking at the data, what do you notice about the trends? What do you wonder? And then ask other questions that we may have answers here, or we can find the answers. But really, it's to honor the intent of a true study session. We wanted this to be more conversational. There is some overview that I think is important to kind of set the context, and then we can engage in the conversation. But really, this is your discussion.
I didn't know you were going to call on me.
Well, you can pass.
I don't feel any special ownership over this. I think it's something that I've heard from former board members, current board members, just a desire to see us use study session time to break out of the rigidity of a typical board meeting, where we're being asked to constantly opine on things and we don't really get to ask difficult questions and kind of explore. And I think coming out of the retreat, where every one of us said our goal was to be the district of choice, that is different from enrollment because that's more capture rate as we get into this. If we're a shrinking district, we could be the district of choice and still be declining in enrollment just because the number of kids are declining. But they're very related. They're very related. So I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that went into this. And I think, to Dr. Menzel's point, if we have more questions coming out of this, that's a feature, not a bug. It doesn't mean, that things weren't well prepared. It means they were really well prepared, that it kind of sparked it. Also, my computer constantly is rebooting with security updates. So if you see me going on my phone or doing things, it is only for that reason. But, yeah.
Do you want to add anything?
No, we just really appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation and to hear the questions. And to your point, the information provided and shared is really just for true discussion. And we're happy to take back anything that you would like for us to look deeper into, collect more data on, or anything from there. And so we're just really pleased at the opportunity to connect and to dive deep and study these efforts and this work.
All right, Dr. Bachna.
We want to make sure that the mics are close because the audio is fading for some.
Okay. So looking at our enrollment wildly important goal was based on looking at our 100th day enrollment in comparison to our enrollment on the last day of school. We were looking at if we could increase the grades 1 through 12 enrollment by a minimum of 1%, and not including our early graduates that graduated in December. And we did meet this goal with a percentage of 1.76.
And just a reminder about why the WIG was framed that way, and remember that the structure of the wildly important goals is from X to Y by a certain date, a very measurable outcome. But we excluded kindergarten and looked at 1st through 12th grade because historically, and you'll see in a later data slide, the number of graduating seniors is significantly higher than the number of incoming kindergartners. And so the wildly important goal this year was structured to look at what is our ability to retain students once they've enrolled with us. So looking at 1st through 12th allowed us to be able to track that growth over time and not be penalized for this cohort differential between graduating seniors and incoming kindergarten students.
And so then when you, just to frame up and kind of tee up the way that the slides are organized, they really are kind of grouped in common data sets. And so what you'll see is the visualization, the data table overviews, opportunity to have some trends and themes, and then really opportunity to dig in, have conversations, and ask questions. But they are kind of organized within common topics. And so we just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of how and why we put those different groupings together. And of course, at any time, as we give an orientation to each slide, just to say, this is how it reads, stop for any questions, any conversation at any point. Oh, yes. And for those of you who are avid note takers like myself, we did print out the slides in color for you with some note questions, just so that you have the opportunity, if As I find myself getting a little bit older in age, I find I have a question, and if I don't write it down or think about it 2 slides later, I'm like, what was I even saying, thinking, or talking about? And so just wanted to offer that to all of you. Feel free to use or not use, but a note catcher is coming around as we dive really into the enrollment journey.
Just gonna let you speak to this one.
So I want to give an overview, but then I'm going to let Dr., what? I don't think so. I
No,
think
I
someone
think I
just
hit, I
brushed their
think I hit
paper on
the
this.
microphone.
When I first saw this chart, I was blown away. Dr. Bachna has been doing so much work in taking volumes of data and trying to create a singular slide that sort of painted the picture. The one part of this slide that I want to make a cautionary note is that where it looks at the charter projected enrollment that shows it going up to the 26,000, that's not an accurate number. We couldn't get that recalibrated in time to update the slide for this. So I just want to point that out. There's not 26,000 charter school students in the boundaries of Scottsdale Unified. We don't have that universe of possible students for them to capture, even if we did. So the use of generative AI to help with the tool gives us an 80% or 90% really good outcome, and then you have something like this that's an outlier that we're still working to fix. The rest of the slide really does break down when did we have policy changes at the state level? When did choice in charters get introduced? When did we have other experiences or events that impacted it? The Great Recession of 08, 09. We know that the expansion of ESAs happened at a certain time. We know when the pandemic happened. So this really gives, I think, a nice overview of where we hit our high water mark and then where things started to decline. And so, Dr. Bachman, if you want to talk about some of the specifics on the slide, but I'll just take one thing that I notice here, and that is the rate of decline since about 2010 or so looks to be pretty constant. I mean, there's a little variation in different years. Sometimes it accelerates, sometimes it flattens out, but overall, it's pretty consistent. But the birth rate decline is actually faster than our rate of enrollment decline. And so to me, that's one of the things I think we still have to watch. And it gets to Dr. Patinsky's point of capture rate versus enrollment, because if we have a shrinking universe over time, that is going to impact the kinds of decisions we make. But Dr. Bachner, would you like to talk more about the details in this slide?
The only thing I'd also like to point out is that the enrollment is our actual enrollment over time from our systems, but our systems changed. We ended up with our current student information system where everything's housed electronically in about 2007, 2008. So our data going back historically was just whatever we could find in files that were left behind. So we really feel more confident in our data from the 2007, 2008 enrollment data from that point on. We do have previous information, but I think some of the dip that we're seeing in 2006, 2007 might have been when we were transitioning systems from more of a paper pencil, keeping track of things, into our student information system that we have today. Okay. So looking at our projected Scottsdale population share by age band, using generative AI, we asked that the Scottsdale census data regarding resident ages for 1990 through 2020 be plotted on line graphs. The census takes place every decade, so the most recent results are from 2020. We then asked ChatGPT to project what the age ranges would be through 2040. As you can see, the number of school-age children residing in Scottsdale has been dropping consistently and is projected to be even lower by 2040.
So just to clarify, this is not a demographer's projection. This is just if we took the current rate and just rolled it forward, where would we end up?
You do. That's what Shannon does.
I mean,
Ish.
yeah, I don't project out census data, but
Your microphone.
But from a projected staffing and budget, that you use this type of information.
we use what has our enrollment been, what is the change, what has historically been the change, which has been about 2%. That's what we use to project that out. Same type of idea is what has that change been and projecting that forward.
And we've had a cadence of maybe every 3 years having a demographic study done. We are probably overdue on that one. And the real question is, to what extent is that information really helping drive future decisions, and how accurate have been prior demographic studies? Because in some ways, they have been on the mark, in other ways, they've missed the mark. And then understanding why and how the information that was projected didn't materialize will be important for us to understand for future consideration.
Yeah, as a straight linear extrapolation, like, I'm okay with it 3-4 years out, but not 20 years out.
Yeah.
But it's the best information we have, and I think, we could look at actions 3-4 years out, because we're in that world. The demographers will take into account larger macro issues and might have things curving up, curving down. So, I'm looking more at the near term than long term on this thing.
And to that end, and I meant to say this up front, I think another real valuable use of this is for the community. It hopefully gives us a common fact basis to have these kinds of conversations. So I think the community is as much, if not more, the audience for this than us, per se. So I think you said it, I apologize for missing it. What is the time period that is actually real data as opposed to the linear kind of extrapolation? It's up until 2020?
Correct, because every 10 years when the data was, right.
So in 1990, school-age children, I want to make sure I'm saying this sentence correctly, school-age children in Scottsdale represented, call it 24% of the population.
Correct.
And as of 2020, it's now 17% or so.
Right.
So that's pretty remarkable. Yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
I want to pause just for a minute. Anybody else want to add a here's what I'm learning, or my takeaway so far? We'll do that at the very end for everybody, but be thinking, what is it we're learning?
On the previous one, with, all the different factors, for that, I like to look at it not as causality. It's really hard to apply cause to those, but they're headwinds. I think it'd be ignorant not to say those are headwinds. How much and, how much a certain gust of wind impacts our sale is not to be determined, but we do have the headwinds, and so I think it's good to show them on there. So I liked it in that way. I had made the comment that the y-axes are all over the place, so, there's a lot of weird causality that's shown, like, oh, look, those two are moving together, so they're related. Not really true, but still, it's good to know they are all headwinds for us.
Can you help me understand, is it just for information context? Why would we have older adults 55 to 74? Not that I want to be put in a category, but in this chart at all? Is it just for interest in context, or aging, selling of homes, whatever we can deduce from it? I'm trying to figure out how to use it in my mind.
Awareness of
play.
the age ranges of people that live in this area.
Yeah, to some
So
to
it's the
100%.
total of the total, is the point. Okay. Doesn't have to be just about schools.
Right.
Could be about other needs of our community.
I'm not sure I should proceed.
Good question.
Okay, I'm
I'm
gonna wait.
glad mine is not the only laptop.
I was like, wait a second.
You're like, what are you doing?
Well, I'm ready. I have-
I'm looking at the slide on my screen.
I know, it's fine, Cindy.
But I cheated. I grabbed your computer because I'm still trying to get mine booted up.
Yeah, it's a little hard to see the detail
I
on the
know.
printed
They're all on
copy.
that blue sheet. All right.
If I could, anecdotally, when we were getting ready to rebuild Hohokam, we took a 3/4 mile radius of that campus and delivered flyers throughout. And what we found was that senior living, the empty nesters, is what fills that community
Yeah.
around Hohokam. So that
Yeah.
data is important to know, because those houses aren't being filled by families, they're filled by empty nesters.
Well, and boy, this really shows it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to say the obvious, if our capture rate stayed the same, we'd still have a declining enrollment district, and it wouldn't be an indictment anything other than we have a declining enrollment community that we're serving. Now, obviously, both are happening, which we'll get into in a moment, but
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, I think we're ready.
Great. Okay, looking at this one, this slide represents the change in K-12 enrollment over time overlaid with the median house prices in Scottsdale. The blue line represents our enrollment, while the red line displays the housing costs. And then looking at this next slide, this slide takes
I'm
the.
sorry, can I
Oh, sorry.
pause for a
Yes.
second? I just want to kind of make a sentence about what this means. I don't want to assume, oh, that's interesting, next. I'm just,
Yeah.
what's the meaning? Maybe I don't know, maybe there isn't any meaning to assign.
Basically, there's just depicting the fact that in this area, the median housing costs have gone up consistently since the 2011, 2012 time of.
Post-2009, right?
So it's harder for young families to afford a house in Scottsdale.
Affordability is the
Another-
assumption. We're
Another
assuming.
headwind.
But we are assuming that because of this chart. Just checking. Okay, thank you.
If you were to look at the same information, looking at year-over-year change on this next slide, this is showing the information in numerical format. So YOY stands for year-over-year change. YOY stands for year-over-year. So for example, in 2009, the median house price was $500,000, a decrease of just over 9% from 2008. And then looking at the chart on the right-hand side, at the same time, K-12 enrollment in 2009 was approximately 26,200, an increase of 1.63% over 2008.
Pause, let's say what this means. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was debating asking a question that will show you how much I still have to learn. I'll say it in a positive growth mindset. To the extent housing prices are going up and some amount of our budget comes through property values in the override, can I read this to say that our kind of revenue yield per house is going up? Or the crazy way in which we do school financing that doesn't compute?
Yeah, so that's a great point that you're making. We have very low tax rate, which is good, but it's low because it's based off of your assessed value. Your assessed value goes up, which ours has been going up considerably every year. Assessed value is a little bit different than what your actual housing price is.
Right.
But as that goes up, it means it's easier for us to generate a larger amount of money with a smaller tax rate.
At
But you're
the same
still,
rate,
yeah, but you're still, I mean, it's based off of what your assessed value is. Your house rate goes up in price, the tax goes up too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why we're able to have one of the lowest tax rates in the valley,
But
is
do you-
because our values are so high.
When you project, is that direct? Does that directly come to us? Like, do you project, oh, there's been a increase in assessed value, therefore our revenue will be up by 2%? Like, do you?
Well, our revenue is based off of what, we're formula driven by the
Right.
state. So what ends up happening is we look at that and go, and we can project out what we think tax rates will be in the future, going, okay, we know generally our enrollment goes down some, the amount per student goes up some, so it kind of evens it out. Project that out based off of knowing what the assessed valuation goes up every single year, so we can kind of project out what that tax rate could be in the future.
So with the housing prices go up, that benefits the state. The state gets more pie. We may or may not, based on the formula.
We're formula driven, we don't get,
And that formula doesn't include.
The revenue control limit, it caps, in part,
Where we're-
what we can assess, and
Right.
so there's a rate limiting factor there. And so that's why the rates continue to stay low.
we are not state funded, so our taxpayers pay.
Locally, they fund our
Locally,
system.
they fund everything needed for our district. Whereas in a lot of districts, they get aid from the state because their taxpayers aren't going to be able to the tax rate would be so astronomical to raise what they would need. It can't happen. They get aid from the state general budget to do that. Our tax rate is low enough,
And our property
pricing
value is high enough that we generate enough money to cover that liability, so the state doesn't
Yep.
have to subsidize in Scottsdale.
Is that answering?
Still not, if the Maricopa County assessor came in tomorrow and said everyone's assessed value doubled,
Yeah.
and it was crazy and everyone's house is worth twice as much, will we see a giant increase in our revenue for the
No,
next year?
no, you would see a decrease in our tax rate.
Right, because we're
The
still,
tax
we're
rate
capped
adjusts
at
to
how
what
much
we
we
need.
can get. The revenue
Yep.
control limit is that rate limiting factor, and then
It
the
backs
tax
into a rate
Yes.
based on a fixed dollar, okay.
Yep,
So
yep.
it doesn't benefit us.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
It would benefit, so it would benefit, say, potentially in a bond issue, where you've got a different debt load that you're carrying, and then you could see a benefit there. But the maintenance and operating override and the capital override have caps as well, right? So the
Okay.
M&O is tied to the RCL, and the capital override has a top dollar amount that we can collect. So all of it has a rate limiter.
So on the bond side, if a bond was, whatever the number is, 2% for, every year for 7 years.
Right.
As housing assessed value goes up, the 2% becomes more and more.
So you could pay down that debt more quickly,
Yeah.
lower the rate. Those are the things that you have. You can see the benefit there in our budget, unlike anywhere else in the budget.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions at this point? And Dr. Bogner, go ahead.
Using the state public data files on enrollment in combination with the enrollment of charter schools where Scottsdale students tend to attend, specifically those of Basis and Great Hearts. That's what's showing on this slide. So when you see the name Basis, it's combining all the Basises in our area. And same thing for the Great Heart schools. And this is looking at specifically schools in this area as opposed to all of the state charter schools. You can see that our enrollment has steadily decreased over time while charter school enrollment in our area has increased. I will say that also the charter schools have increased their number of schools and the grades served over the time periods in this chart.
Say that last sentence again, I will say.
The charter schools have increased the number of schools in this area during this time period as well as the grade levels served.
Facilities, okay.
So, for instance, when some of the charter schools opened, like high school, they only served 9th and 10th grade the first year. They added 11th grade the next year. They added 12th grade the following year. So that's where we see some of the greater gains in charter enrollment was during those periods where they were adding more grade levels each year.
Do you have a sense of whether 2020 is roughly when that build-out is sort of apples to apples? Because there is a very marked difference.
Right.
These percentage changes, I assume, are from the beginning of the
Yes.
series to the end. There is a pretty marked difference if you look more at 2020 to 2024, how our trend compares to their trend.
I would agree, yes. When I was looking at the schools going back in time, the earliest I could go was 2015. Before that, there weren't just, the charters weren't actually there that are taking as much, that it encompass this area as much. So I think they kind of leveled out in 2020, and now they're starting to reseed a tiny bit, at least at the basis.
Do we have a feeling anecdotally that the Basis Great Hearts are fairly saturated? That they're probably not gonna continue to expand in our boundaries? Is there any sort of feel for that based on experience?
I'm not sure on my own.
Okay. And Basis is Phoenix and Scottsdale, the two on either side?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was approximately 6 or 7 schools that are included there. I don't have them listed out in front of me, but I can tell
Sure,
you later.
that's fine.
And sorry, were you going to ask? This may be coming ahead, I forget. Do we know whether these are the top schools that we're losing students to?
So
if we do like a from to.
From a charter perspective, yes, those are the top two. Basis and Great Hearts are the top two. So there's a whole list, I don't know if we have that from Kurt, a whole list of the other charters, but they're in the hundreds or dozens, not in the thousands. So Great Hearts and Basis are the top two that pull from our SUSD boundaries for the charter schools.
Yeah, and that kind of aligns later when we talk about why families are leaving with academic rigor as their number one reason. That sort of aligns a little bit in terms of how these schools position themselves, or at least Basis. I know a little less about Great Hearts.
So looking again at the year-over-year change on the numbers from the previous slide, changes in K-12 enrollment in numerical format, basically. The number of charter schools expanded during the time period, which I already mentioned. Scottsdale has had fairly steady decreases in enrollment each year, ranging from a high of -4% in 2021 to a low of -0.3% in 2022. Interestingly enough, Basis enrollment has also retracted over the past few years, while Great Hearts enrollment has mostly increased.
choices was in 2021. Okay. And then in 2022, and then, okay, so interesting peak. I went back to the previous slide to see that.
President Lewis.
Member Warner has a.
Yeah, help yourself.
Have we looked at why that is?
Can you pull your microphone down? Thank
Why
you.
what is the cause for students and families leaving Scottsdale Unified for Great Hearts? Have we figured out what that cause is? Like, what is it the product? What is it?
I'm not sure I do not have a clear answer other than what's been reported on the exit surveys and looking what some people are reporting as why they're choosing certain schools. And we still need to do a little bit further analysis of that data to get more into the detail of, we have the exit survey data where it says, these are the schools that we're choosing, but we haven't analyzed it to say, let's just look at the people that are reporting they want to choose charter schools and all the reasons they're leaving. That's the next analysis, and you had kind of pointed that out too, that's the next analysis we need to do.
And some of those never start in Scottsdale. So like I have a neighbor who chose a different charter school. They were on a wait list. They had a friend group. She told me this was not a knock on the local neighborhood school, but it was because of the friend group, and they were looking, and so that's how they made their decision. So they were never in our system, so we wouldn't have had the ability to pull the data to figure out, okay, why'd you make that choice? Except for she happened to be selling Girl Scout cookies at my house and explaining why she made the decision she did.
Yeah, I was specifically referring to the students that are leaving.
That were here.
Yes.
Yes, that's something that we need to explore further, I agree.
So we'll get into it later in general. We don't have it on a school-by-school basis.
Not tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which I do think matters.
I agree.
Sorry.
Also, for the board members, I mean, even employees, it's very easy to ask your neighbors, you know? I mean, I've got 2 neighbor friends that started out in SUSD and they've both left. And we're constantly comparing curriculum, we're constantly comparing book lists, and they show me exactly why they've left. And it's very easy for me to see that as well. I mean, when we stopped giving summer reading, right, when you stopped mandating summer reading, you think they're doing that? No, they're not. You know, so like we've lowered standards and they have not, from what I see. And it's good because you can do that with your neighbors. Look back and forth at what the curriculum is and what's being offered. They'll be glad to show you why they left.
Yeah, we are going to move into some more, the next phase of data, or the next kind of section really talks about cohorts and cohort progressions. And so we just wanted to offer any additional discussions related to the enrollment journey and the trends that we have shared so far before we jump into cohort information.
So what are you wondering about things right now? What are you wondering about?
I'm wondering a little bit of what Dr. Menzel teed up, which is, are they leaving us or are they not trying us in the first place? I mean, I have the same experiences. I know when the bond didn't pass and every Wednesday was half day and all the clubs were canceled, I lost a number of, family friends who took their kids out. I know during COVID, we lost family friends based on what other schools were doing in terms of either online education, that's the hard thing about neighbors is we could have one neighbor who left because we were returning to school too fast, and we could have another neighbor who was concerned that we weren't the opposite. We weren't going fast enough. But what I'm wondering is, are they not trying us? Or are they trying us and leaving? And the thing that jumps out at me, which I honestly had no sense of coming in, is just how marked the decline in school-age kids in Scottsdale is.
The overall.
The overall. So, I mean, again, even if we had the exact same
It's a great takeaway.
capture rate, if we were as successful as our wildest dreams to be the first choice, we would still be a shrinking district because we're serving a shrinking community of school-age families. And so enrollment is not in and of itself an indictment of the performance of the district. It is also the case, though, that we are declining in our market share too. But that stood out to me also.
Yeah.
And I think there's anecdotal data on parents who have left Basis or Great Hearts and come to Scottsdale, and we have information on that as well. I think that the challenge is how do we go from the anecdotal data to something that's more quantifiable so that we can make decisions based on it, because you'll hear the stories related to why they leave. You'll hear the stories, because I met with a family, we were celebrating a scholarship that their senior from Desert Mountain received a year ago, and they said, we're really happy to talk about why we left Great Hearts to come back to Scottsdale. So that's an anecdote, not a systems level decision, and it can be unique to the needs of the family, the needs of the student. It could be they leave Basis because they really want the full high school experience with respect to what we offer for performing arts. That's going to be a different reason than what somebody else chooses to leave or stay. And so how we tease that out is going to be really important in order to make good inferences rather than just taking the anecdotes and extrapolating to an entire population.
One thing I like, think about doing not here, but like business-wise strategic analysis. You do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and what you look at is internal, external. What are the things that we have going for us that we can control? What are the things that are happening externally that are happening to us that we can't control? And you know, I think back to at the retreat, we kind of talked about the goal, but then we talked about what are the things we can do to impact that positively. And so
Actionables and barriers, I think we identified them.
yeah, and I think going through this whole deck will be good because it's bringing up a lot of things that, like it or not, are beyond our control, right? Scottsdale, great, awesome, houses are worth a lot of money, but that's got a negative impact on our schools. But let's not lose focus on what we can control on those things. And if it is rigor, we absolutely can control rigor, right? We can impact academic outcomes, we can impact attendance, all of those come into play. And so, you know, kind of my takeaway, whether it's here or continued, is, you know, yes, those things are happening to us, but what can we do? Because we absolutely have control over those.
I think we can wonder and notice possibilities for what is within our control and what isn't. I think that might be a good use of some time tonight if we don't exhaust ourselves. But I really like the pace that we have. Thank you, Dr. Bachna, and for the comments so far. Anything else to add?
Well, that's why I had brought up in the first agenda item that
Yeah.
politically charged curriculum is something we have control over.
So
Yep.
we're going to talk later on reasons why people leave. And let's go back there and see if that shows up as why people are leaving, because the data tells us really good information in that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So we have Cherokee, Cheyenne, and Hopi with wait lists for kindergarten. And I had brought this up a couple of years ago, is what are they doing that's making them successful that families want? And why wouldn't we replicate that at some of our other schools that are struggling to get enrollment? Because while there's a decrease in population, I also know families, and I have neighbors just like you do, and they will drive their children to their school of choice. And with a wait list here of nearly 100 kids, why are we not duplicating what we're doing in the schools that have wait lists?
I think a big part of that is identifying what is that secret sauce. Is it a person? Is it the principal is just awesome, people love him or her? Is it the geography? Is it a reputation? That's really good to look into. During the election process last year, someone at one point said, we should look what other schools are doing and replicate that, like Basis. I'm like, yeah, if you look into why Basis is doing well, there's a lot of details there that we would never repeat. And so I'm with you, and I think looking into what it is that's there, like getting down to school by school, like you all know better than I do, it could very well be there is a beloved principal and everyone goes to that school because of him or her. That's great. How can we replicate that? You know, is it training? Is it hiring? But again, what can we control?
So typically it's about best practices and what Cherokee's doing academically with their math, and they have seasoned staff, and it is the school, my neighbors go there, and two of my neighbors have kids there, and you know, Walt did a great job, and I know that they have a good principal there now too, but things always fall under leadership. If you have a good, strong leader, you typically have a good school, but when you have a weak leader, then that also reflects. And what is the product that they're putting out at each of the different schools? And I think that It's just something to take a look at, We have 4 really successful elementary schools, and
What was your fourth one, Karen? I got Cherokee, Cheyenne, Hopi. Do you remember the fourth?
I have Cherokee, Cheyenne, Cochise, and
Cochise,
Hopi.
thank you.
And I would love to have that because I don't have that understanding. In the same way we're talking about the data here to have a shared understanding of what's impacting, I would love to get down to the school level, that we could all be on consensus that these schools are doing well. And look, you know it better than I do. You've been involved more than I have. I would love to kind of level set so we can all say, look, do we agree that Cherokee's doing great, and identify here's the 1 or 2 or 3 factors because of it. So I like that you bring it up. I would love to have us all at consensus that yes, those are the reasons why they're doing well, because I think that would help for us of best practice to put forward. And you may know them off the top of your head, and that's great. I don't, and I would love that to be shared amongst us.
Yeah, there's not one factor though, so if you look at where the schools are located, it's a variable. So for a Cherokee, they have a large open enrollment population, and where they're boundaried up against PV, they are pulling from out of the district. So some's in district, some is out. Hopi has the lowest amount of external open enrollment of any school in our district because their in-boundary population chooses Hopi. And so there's not a lot of extra space on that campus, which then creates demand. And because of their proximity to Phoenix, you have some of those families that want to get in, but there's no space for them to get in. Whereas other schools, you might have that.
Can we jump, who's controlling the slides?
Cindy is.
Can we jump ahead to slide 17? Because I think it speaks to what you raised, just so we have it up behind us. Is that okay?
Oh, that's a good idea.
But one way to think about answering that question, and I agree it's a great question, Karen, is what are things that are common to schools and what are things that are vary across schools? If schools that are seeing a huge wait list and schools that have a lot of extra capacity are running the same curriculum, then it would suggest maybe it's not the curriculum. On the other hand, thinking about Cheyenne, if schools that generally have more traditional curriculum are attracting students at a higher rate than those that don't, then maybe that begins to point towards curriculum. So I think it would be interesting to think about 4 or 5, and I think a few were mentioned, characteristics and
Right.
ask the question, are these consistent across schools or do they vary? And to the extent they vary, are they varying in a consistent way
Well, and we have
to the demand that we're seeing?
We have a case study on that. I think those are the right questions. I absolutely agree they're the right questions. The district made a decision because Cheyenne had a wait list and was a popular model to take and create a traditional school at Pima. And the Pima Traditional School never, ever reached the kind of demand, wait list, and community support that Cheyenne has. So it also has to take into account what the neighborhood wants as well. And then I think about the other that's really interesting is that Copper Ridge, another K-8, just around the corner from Cheyenne, has uniforms like Cheyenne does, but a different curriculum. And so you have 2 K-8s in relatively close proximity, one with a traditional curriculum and structure, one without it, both with uniforms. The universe of students that you can capture in that geographic circle may be a rate limiting factor as well. And so part of it is, a wonder is maybe a different location for another traditional, not in South Scottsdale. It didn't work with Pima, but maybe it works in the Arcadia learning community somewhere. I don't know the answer to that, but those are the kinds of questions that we need to explore, because what's driving parent decision related to the schools they're choosing? And it may be that it's the curriculum, it may be it's the principal, it may be the culture and
Location.
climate, it could be location. So yeah, we need to explore all of
The
those.
uniforms.
That might be a good,
First.
macro, micro for another study session. So if this is the macro, looking
Right.
across at the high level, a next study session is micro and gets to the school level to get that information out. I think that's a really good use of our time to level set on that. Because there's much more meat in this presentation I want to continue to go through.
I just think one last thing, those 4 schools that you named and we talked about, they all have very high parent involvement, right? So that is something to factor in too, right? Not everyone has that ability, but I think that's one of the factors that make those so successful.
And that's great, then ask ourselves, is that something we can impact or not? I think it's a great topic to talk about,
Yeah.
right? Is it just innately that those parents are awesome and get involved? Or can we do things in areas to help
involve
get that? I think
them.
that's a wonderful conversation to have. Thanks for bringing that up.
Gladys, are you able to bullet these different ideas that are being brought up as you take notes after you listen to the tape again? Because I'd like it captured in the minutes. Okay, thank you. I think we have a lot of great topic ideas to dig into. Okay, I think there might be some more comments. Karen? Amy, anything for now?
And I didn't mean to get us out of order. I just thought this
Oh,
was.
slide 17, here it comes.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that one, though.
So if we want to go back to where we were, that's fine. But I thought it spoke to it.
So that was a yes to 17, yes? Or we're just going forward?
We're going to come back to 17, but we need to talk about these.
Okay, okay, thank you. Cohorts, yeah.
All right, so the data reflected here reflects the past 5 completed cohorts. So each of the rows on this slide depict 13 years of enrollment for a single cohort. The top line starts with 2007, 2008, which represents the class of 2020. When the kindergarten cohort started that year, in 2007, 2008, there were 1,584 students. And at the end of 2020, there were just over 2,073 students. You can see the same progression up until the most recent class of graduates in 2024. For the most part, enrollment has tended to increase throughout elementary school and then drop off in the middle grade levels before rising again in high school. That's why there's different shades of blue. So the darker shades of blue are higher numbers, and the lighter shades of blue or green, I guess you could say, are lower numbers.
Cindy, can you
yeah.
walk me through a body of
Sure.
change over the years? So just say, look at the first 2
So let's-
blocks that are aqua, you know?
Okay, so let's look at the very top line.
Right.
2007, 2008, they were kindergartners. That
Uh-huh.
was the 1584.
Okay.
In 28, 29,
21.
2008, 2009, there was 1,938, which are the next block over.
Right.
And then the next school year would have been 2009, 2010, and there were 1,917 second graders. So the same cohort over time. The following year, they're third graders, that was 1868. The following year, they were fourth graders, 1869. And then the following year, there were 1813 as fifth graders. Then they headed into sixth grade as 1749. Seventh grade was 1796. Eighth grade was 1847. And then we saw an increase in that cohort from eighth to ninth grade. And their freshman year the class of 2020 had 2,135 students in it. The sophomore class had 2,090 students. The junior class had 2,055 students, and ultimately we ended up with a senior class of 2,073. So it's this 13 years worth of the same class.
Well, that's a pretty powerful standing increase as kids become ninth graders. So they come to us after what I remember, and I may be off on this, a demise mostly through sixth through eighth grade. Is that true for us too? Am I reading it right?
Yes,
A
you're right.
demise in sixth through eighth grade, which
So-
is a funny phenomenon.
So we switched schools between fifth and sixth grade, so it seems that maybe people are choosing to try a different environment for middle school years, but then we're coming back typically for the ninth grade year.
Boy, that says a lot.
When
So
did,
that
when
might be
did
an
we
interesting.
change from K6 to K5s? Because there was a shift somewhere in there.
We
And
were
as late as
just
the
talking
2020s?
about that. I want to say it was in the Dave Peterson era,
So
so
the
that would be.
2011 to 2015 period?
So, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a little bit of a.
Because we didn't talk about that in our internal review in terms of what impact that had, having our elementaries go from K6 to K5 and creating true 6-8 middle schools versus junior highs. But that could be a factor in here that we had contemplated in terms of
That's true.
choices parents were making.
Okay, and then overall, again, going back to Matt's point, as the class of 2024 emerges, it is fundamentally a lower number, but that's just enrollment, that's not capture.
No.
It mirrors capture, but it.
It's purely enrollment numbers for
Do,
the point in
and
time.
do we have that proportionately? So we've always had 80%, or we've always had, do we have a proportionate sense of capture?
That's on another slide.
Okay, I'll be quiet. Okay, I'm done. Karen?
Ms. Turner, do you mind sharing about some of the historical? I think you're the
Yeah.
only one that's been here for a long time.
I became principal in 1999, 2000, and my class was K5.
You were K-5 when you started?
So we didn't, even when I started, we didn't have sixth grade.
Okay.
What year was that?
That was, I started in 99, getting old. I started in 99, and it was K5, and I don't know how long it had already gone to Ingleside 6, 7, and 8. So it was long before 2014, 15.
I feel like there was some back and forth that happened. So, yeah. I think different schools had different patterns of, some were 6, 7, 8 at the junior high level or middle school level, where some were just 7, 8, and it became a more standardized, all schools, all middle schools will be 6, 7, 8, somewhere in the Dave Peterson era.
Does that sound right, Margaret?
I don't recall, I just remember attending meetings and we were K5. Then some went to K8, and, but I don't remember seeing a K6. So I'm not sure, I'm sure we can dig the history, but.
Well, the bumps are here in the, I mean, we're only looking really at 6 years of data, so we can go back if we want to, but it is
Yeah.
trend-ish.
Okay.
We have a document that we just recently were working on that has a history of every school, its name change, what grade levels it served, when that was changed, and we're just putting the final touches on it today. And so we'll share that as soon as we are finished.
Perfect. We'd love to see that. Thank you. Thank you for sending that.
So, with love and respect, this is one of those slides that only a
Hard to
data
understand.
scientist can love.
I apologize.
So I stared at this one for a long time. So I want to think about what it does address and what it leaves unaddressed. So let me start with what it doesn't address. What this is not, for lack of a better term, is a survival analysis. This is not taking the 1584 and say, obviously, because it wouldn't increase, what percentage of them are still here 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years
Could be a
later,
revolving
7
door of
years
kids.
later.
Yeah.
This is a different population of kids each
Just
time.
the aggregate.
So in our kind of wish list, I think it would be really interesting to understand how that survival rate has changed,
Yes.
over the last couple of years, if we're able to kind of fix off of that original kindergarten population. What it is a way of understanding when do we tend to lose people and when do we tend to gain them. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And the answer to when we tend to lose them, not surprisingly, and gain them, is when there's building changes. Would that be an oversimplification?
That was our assumption guess.
When we're just looking at
Might be a takeaway.
when things decline, they're declining around 5th or 6th grade.
Yep.
So that's when you
Right.
might start thinking about, I love my elementary school, but that middle school seems scary, and I hear all sorts of terrible things are happening in the bathrooms, or the bathrooms are locked, because of the terrible things that I hear are happening in the bathrooms. Sorry to, go after bathrooms, although he's not here, so.
He
I
left.
can
He
do
knew
it.
that was coming.
But it's amazing how often people talk about bathrooms in their choice of schools.
It's true. That's so true.
And then, is that the main point we're losing them? Between 5th and 6th grade? And then what happens is either there are fewer options
That's where the
for high
lightest
school.
colors are.
Either there are fewer options for high school, so families will come back to us, or it turned out the grass isn't greener, and they decide at the end of the day they'd rather just go back to their community high school. Maybe, could you just do a little bit more of a narrative? What do we know about when do we lose kids and when do we gain kids?
So historically, yes, we've somewhat tended to lose them more in middle school and gain them back in high school. This is an assumption on my part. I believe basis is 6 through 12. So I could see if you were to want to try that model, you might go for the middle school, and right around this class of 2022 is when those bases were becoming more prevalent in this area. But then I think what might be happening is some families are choosing that environment and then going, wait a second, I want a more comprehensive high school, and then choosing to return back to our school district. But we have typically seen higher enrollment in our ninth grade classes historically in the data back a few years.
Which has shifted recently. So
Yes, it has.
the last 2 years, that trend has shifted. So that's a point of concern because it had been really consistent that we had the big bump in the freshman year, and you might have a little bit of attrition by the time you got to your graduating class. But last year, I think, was the first year where we noticed a pretty
different.
significant dip.
Right.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? What is
So
the thing
in the
that
ninth
changed?
grade cohort, the cohorts had been averaging 1,900 roughly since I got here. And last year, the freshman cohort was just under 1,800 maybe. And so that was the first time we didn't maintain that kind of threshold. So the 1,900 dropped to, by the time they graduated, 1,800. But that incoming freshman cohort had historically been higher. Last year was the first time it was significantly lower than the prior, decade or so.
So sorry.
No.
Where we gain and where we drop, you look at this, where it goes from light to dark, there's two big spots, K to 1 and 8 to 9. If you look at each of those years, though, the amount that we go up has been getting lower and lower. Now, for the K to 1, that's 15 years ago, so it's really hard to kind of put your stock in that. But the 8 to 9, the 708 cohort went up by 16%. The 11-12 cohort went up by 12%. So while we are going up the light to dark from 8 to 9, it's been going up by less and less. And likewise, on the flip side, the 5 to 6 sees an increase, and that's actually been getting better. But again, 5 to 6 now, that's 10 years ago. So, having these more recent, and granted, you wouldn't have completed cohorts, but you would still have partial lines for each. You can kind of see the trends of those changes. Yes, it's going up from 8 to 9, but it's going up by less and less each year. And so that's nice nuance in there to kind of see what's going on.
I know there's a difference between graduation rate and dropout rate. They're two very different metrics. I'm just curious where that lives in this, and I don't need the information right now, but it might be another follow-up, is there a pattern of dropout?
Okay.
And I say that
Sure.
knowing they're very different.
So does this slide at all address my wonder around the question, is it families don't give us a try? Or is it they give us a try and they decide that it's not a good match for them?
I think that has shifted. So what you don't see in these cohorts, you have higher kindergarten cohorts. And if you look at the last 5 to 7 years, those numbers go down from 1,700 to smaller numbers, 1,500, 1,400, 1,300. So I think the answer in the more recent period is that we have some that are not even giving us a shot, combined with the declining birth rate, which means you have a smaller universe of potential enrollees. So those two combined, I think, would explain, the lower kindergarten enrollments. But then I think it's a mixed bag with respect to the others in the cohort.
And we offer full-day kindergarten across all schools.
We do, yes.
Because in some places, that was a feature. Not in Scottsdale. You can keep it on.
I'm afraid
It's
I
just-
keep blocking her too, so let's get back.
All right. Okay, this slide depicts the cohort retention rates of students in Scottsdale, Basis, and Great Hearts.
Thank you.
For the Scottsdale SUSD class of 2020, who started ninth grade during the 2016-2017 school year, so those are the first 3 dots on the left-hand side, 94% of the ninth grade population matriculated to 12th grade. For Basis, that number was 87%, and for Great Hearts, that number was 66%. In other words, the senior classes of Basis and Great Hearts were smaller than their freshman classes by a significant amount. For the latest group of seniors who are freshmen in 2020-2021, which is the final dots on the right-hand side, The senior classes at Basis and Great Hearts were only 70% of the size of the freshman cohort. All this is to say that Basis and Great Hearts have substantially smaller senior class sizes than enter their schools as freshmen 4 years earlier.
Say that again, that last sentence. All this is,
Basis and Great Hearts have substantially smaller senior class sizes than enter their schools as freshmen 4 years earlier.
okay.
So this is the survival rate that I was talking about earlier, but just only looking at high school. Right. Okay.
I wish this were published everywhere. Like, I support, choice, and I want parents to do what's best for the kids. We do what's best for our kids. But like, we are never gonna be Basis and Great Hearts, right? We are never gonna have a third of our kids, not, a third of our 9th graders not be 12th graders in our school. And that's a huge difference in how we operate. Like, this to me is a story that I don't think is obvious. And, nothing, no action about it, but like, I just love this picture because it tells that story of who we are.
I think we're okay.
Okay, so capture rate. This slide depicts the capture rate of SUSD over time. Internal capture rate refers to the percentage of students residing in SUSD boundaries and attending SUSD schools. You can see that the first drop in this capture rate occurred in the 90s before rebounding in the early 2010s. By the 2019-2020 school year, the capture rate was 58% and currently sits at 59% of students residing in Scottsdale. The net capture rate refers to the percentage of residents attending Scottsdale schools plus students from outside of Scottsdale. You can see that our net capture rate is higher at 73% in 2022-2023, the most recent data we have available. This is an indication that families outside of Scottsdale are choosing to enroll their students in Scottsdale schools. We'll get into a more detailed breakout of where our students live later in the presentation.
So one of the factors, when you look at the Great Recession component there, and I'm going to speculate here, but what we saw in Michigan at that same time was that families who had been paying for parochial education didn't have the money to do it, so they came back to our schools. And then when the economy shifted, they went back to the parochial option. So I don't know whether or not that happened here, but I know it happened there just because people were so pinched for money that they could no longer afford the tuition for the private school.
Do we know anything about 23-24 to have a sense of, or that's one data point, it's a good one that's moving up, but do we have any sense of whether we're gonna
Economic, or
find
what are you asking?
the capture rate, the 54 to 59?
I see.
Do we have any sense of whether that's going to be better than 59, par, or the 59 is the blip?
I'm not sure yet. I'd have to look into it further to
Shannon, what's
find
your,
out.
what do you, Shannon, the crystal ball lady?
I don't have
No, she thinks an aggregate enrollment.
Yeah, I have no crystal ball on this, other than to say, I think part of it would be, we haven't done a demographic study in a little bit, and so we get a lot of that data from that, so I think part of it would be looking at another study to capture
What do
more of
those
that
typically
information.
cost?
About 15,000,
15, 20, that's what I was gonna guess.
yeah.
And then there was the previous slide with Basis and Great Hearts, which showed a flattening and dip in their enrollment. So there's a hypothesis that, their flattening and going down would add to our increase of capture rate, just from throwing it from one bucket to the other hypothesis. But, those two trends are happening around the same time.
Well, theirs could just be indexing the declining population.
Could be correlate, not
No.
direct.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's hard to know, but
But are you saying that the capture rate is a metric we get from demographic studies, or it's just an operational metric that we get from the state or from some other source?
We're getting this one from the demographer based on our data enrollment.
Ah,
What's your pause?
so, I just thought it was an operational metric, like the state told us our capture rate every year or something. So we have to spend money to constantly capture this metric, and we do every
Yes.
year.
Well, we don't spend the money every year. Because it's $15,000, we look to do the formal demographic study about every 3 years or so.
Karen?
Is this, the demographer, is this the rounds that we did in 22? No?
No, it's Rick Brammer, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we hired someone in the 2022, 23, and then they looked back a couple of years to the last study and.
They did studies, they did a study for us in 1920, 2021, and 22, 23.
Got it, that's good. So going back to our retreat, is it fair to say if our number one objective is to be the school of choice, and we had a wildly, I don't know how to say the
Wig.
phrase, if we had a big goal, this would be the metric?
Yeah.
Or is that too simplistic?
No, I think you.
Whether it's we want to increase it by 2 points, 4 points, 1 point.
This lends itself to
is
from
the
X to
metric.
Y by when. This is a metric that would work, yes.
Do we all feel that way? Do we all think this is like a really important metric, or?
I'd like to look at the methodology, just to kind of understand
Right.
how much is actual data, how much is kind of sampling, just to get a feel. Conceptually, yes, I think that's kind of the wig to look at, but because it's not a, state generated number or a census generated number, I think there's a little bit of wiggle room in there to understand, but
And I don't
definitely
think it
directionally good.
gets to Amy's point earlier about why. I mean, I think the gap is still to be studied, and I don't think a demographer will do that. That's
Oh, no, I
a
agree with
survey
that.
that's also,
Yeah.
I'm leaning forward too fast, but I think that's, might be something else to add.
I mean, I've thought of a high grounds or a noble predictive insight kind of survey to get at what are the variables that parents use to make their choices related to that. So the data is important, and it tells part of the story, but doesn't tell the whole story. So we probably need a supplemental data set as well.
Great. Move on? All right, thank you. Dr. Bogdan?
Yep. Should keep going, we kind of been
Yep.
talking? Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Thank you for
We're
asking.
noticing and wondering all along.
Yeah, this is good.
So where are we now? So let's look at some of our information about the current enrollment, and this gets back to slide 17. Okay, so here you are seeing the K-12 enrollment change over time by learning community. Each learning community is represented in a different color. Some schools have been seeing positive changes in enrollment over time in each learning community, except for Desert Mountain. That learning community has shown declines across all their schools since this is going back to 2014. I wanted to point out that Tonalea was converted to a middle school during the 22-23 school year, so their drop includes the loss in enrollment from no longer serving an elementary school population. I will say, I just looked at this number right before I came in. If you take into account just the middle grade levels at Tonalea, their decrease is still there, but it's only about 42%.
So it looks similar to Coronado High School.
It does.
Yeah.
Do we have capture rate at this level? Do we know, are some of our schools better or worse at, I know they're not all neighborhood schools, but for those that are tied to an enrollment zone, do we know whether Cherokee gets 80% of the kids who live in the Cherokee enrollment zone, but Sequoia probably also, but Sequoia only gets 60%?
Do we have that one?
I'm not sure that captures capture rate, though. That's just,
Yeah, the challenge is, and I'm trying to go back to the last study Rick Brammer did, knowing how many school-age children and the grade level in particular in each elementary school is what I don't know if we have at that level of granularity. So you can do it within our boundaries a little bit more easily. I have to check and see if he's done it at the building level. He does have some pretty detailed building level information. The question is, do we have enough to be able to do the capture rate analysis?
And would it be helpful to send out, I mean, was a few years ago, but would it be helpful to send that out?
I think we've sent
I
it
think,
out.
yeah,
Have we?
I've
Okay, good.
received it.
Yeah, we have it in a PDF form.
Yeah.
So the issue is we need to figure out how do we take the data and put it into something where we can actually,
yeah, some of what you've seen tonight in these slides is me copying the numbers from his presentation in order to make up something for
Right.
us.
So rudimentary question, what is the actual raw number of Tonalea Middle School?
Oh, 42% decline since 2014. So basically, this is a percentage change over time. So what this is saying is their enrollment has gone down by 42% from 2014 to 2025.
I was just curious what that raw number was, the end,
What's the count?
what's the end count?
I'd have to look it up. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that's on there today.
Be careful what you promise.
Yeah, you do.
Thank you.
I do have a question since we're on this.
Can we
Turn
the
your mic
so-
on.
Thanks.
Hiding behind my computer. So on February 25th, 2025, our student enrollment, including kindergarten, was 19,874. And then today, what you sent, Dr. Bachner, was 20,686. I'm curious where those 800 students came from.
Is one a K-12 and one a pre-K-12 out of curiosity?
No, they're the same. They're exactly the same.
I'll have to look, I'm not sure. It's,
Say your question again, Karen.
So on February 25th, the enrollment update that was sent to us showed 19,874 students. The one that was sent to us today shows 20,686.
I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah, I subtracted the toddlers, the pre-K and the kindergarten, and
That's right.
that puts 18,677 on the February 25th and 18,696 on for today.
Okay.
Oh, you added score, but score is now at,
Score should have been this year, it's been in there all this current school year, so I'll just have to take a look at that with you maybe after.
well, hold on. So with score, and then when we looked at, was this included when we were doing the enrollment goals back in, I have more notes. We were having these good discussions last fall, and it was actually related to the performance goals for Dr. Menzel. So we added score in.
Score students last year were incorporated into the school count totals for each of the high schools that they were associated with. This year, because we've established them as a separate school with the state, they now are reflected in their own school name.
What's
But
score? I'm
last-
so sorry, I don't know what score is.
Score is the special needs students that stay till 21, and they now go
Oh.
over to Scottsdale Community College.
Yeah, okay.
The students were still counted last year, they just weren't called out as score until now. So they were incorporated into the student counts for the 5 brick and mortar high schools previously.
We get ADM for them, and we
Interesting.
pay Scottsdale.
Thank you.
So it wouldn't affect aggregate counts, it would just affect where they were.
Right, exactly.
assigned.
Yeah, they were counted last year, they just weren't called out as a separate entity.
Okay, that's interesting. So, yeah, so we're still 800 students between end of February and now.
Cindy, and what she's looking at compared to, here's the one you just sent today. This one,
Oh.
it says 25, 26. Is
So
that-
one of them's the future year and one of them's current year. Does one say 25, 26 and one
Okay, I
say
see.
24,
Okay, so you're
25?
expecting
So one's for,
800, you're expecting an 800 student loss for 25, 26.
I'm not expecting a student loss per se. That's what I'm reporting is literally enrolled in our system right now for next year. So that will continue
Okay.
to change until we get to the school year.
Because we're
Thank you
taking
for that
open enrollment.
Yeah.
clarification. I appreciate that.
No, that's
Dr.
okay. It was,
Buckner.
when he
Thank
pulled it
you.
up, I could see the color.
Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate that. I'm like, ooh.
I knew we hadn't changed that dramatically in the school year, so,
I'm looking exactly.
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Good clarification.
Thank you.
So I understand the challenge of the capture rate by school. We presumably can do the survival rate by school. We can ask and answer the question of kids who start at Cherokee, what percent are here, and we can have some sense of how different
Retain,
sites
the
are
kids we
doing
retain.
in retaining.
We can do that. We'll want to do a little bit further analysis. So depending on the school, there's a level of permanence in some parts of our community, and there's a level of transience in other part of our community, but yeah.
I
we can do
understand that, and I understand if I was a site leader, I would be listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, is someone gonna judge my performance as a principal because, you know, I have a 5% higher, you know, or 5% lower retention rate than a different school, and I'm serving a totally different apples to orange. So there needs to be trust
Yeah.
that we can
Right.
understand that, but at the same time to purposely choose not to know whether some schools are doing a better job than other schools in
have
retaining
mobility rate,
students,
don't
I
we?
think it's not.
I think it's a fair question. We will also ask the question, how did the students who've been with us for their entire educational career perform on our state assessments compared to those who were not with us the whole time? So we do a different dive on the data. So not to judge in terms of, because we know transiency sometimes is not within the purview of the principal. But if you're with us the whole time, then we own the educational assessment from start to finish, and not that someone came in deficient and we're trying to catch them up. So I think there's a way to look at the data that's non-threatening, but still helps tell a story.
Yeah, so I don't want to back away. I understand the non-threatening. I don't want to back away. You know, Matt made a good point before. Our deltas happen when they change buildings. And if someone's changing buildings because I don't like this school and going to another, that's a change point and a potential loss point. So going back to the what can we control, right? If families are going from, 3 to 4, from, 3rd grade at this SUSD elementary to 4th in this one, that's still a change. That's still a potential loss point, and that's still something we could potentially control. So I don't, when we were talking at the retreat, I mentioned accountability. Like, again, going back to this, not want to call someone out and, put the spotlight on them, but I think from an accountability standpoint, if there is loss, it may be explainable. It may very well be, look, the demographics of where my elementary school sits, this is what happens. But I think putting it on the table is a good thing to have that discussion around. So I don't want to shy away from getting down to school level data, because I think it'll inform us.
So Jim Collins in the book Good to Great talks about confronting the brutal facts. So I absolutely agree, we need to put the data on the table. I just want to have a cautionary note to not jump to conclusions without making sure that we've asked the 5 whys to really understand, unpack to get to root cause and see what's happening there. So yes to the data, and being thoughtful about, okay, let's not misinterpret what we're seeing without saying what other contextual variables might have impacted what we're seeing in the data.
Yeah, and I would want to be very transparent with the site leaders and let them know, right? This is not, us judging you and grading you. This is us trying to get to our goal of making Scottsdale a school of choice, and we need them more to find out and have them part of it. They know, right? And the one school visit I'd done since I started, like, it was a great conversation. Like, they know their school, and so that's valuable information to bring out. And so, yeah, I'm glad we don't want to shy away.
They also know their trend. I mean, I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but registrars see the future.
Thank you.
Right? Registrars see the future. The registrar at, my kid goes to Kokopah. The registrar at Kokopah knows this year, I'm seeing a 10% increase in kids who are applying to Brophy or applying to Notre Dame.
Right.
Or what have you. So, and of course, for any one child, we should focus on nothing but helping that family achieve what they're looking for. So I want to be really careful about that. We would never want to think about it. I don't think we want to call anyone up and say, I see you've requested a transfer to go to Brophy. Can I sit down and talk to you and try to convince you to stay? As a parent, that would have been very upsetting to me. That said, if the registrar is noticing over the last 3 years, we're seeing an increase in the number of families who are exploring other options as measured by transcript requests or counselor recommendations. I think that's seeing the future. That's helpful. And it's a within-school trend line.
Right.
Which I think addresses some of your concerns about differences across schools.
And so I appreciate that. I think there is a way to ask the question that may not be threatening. So I had talk to a parent who had mentioned somewhere that their former parent in our district, so I didn't realize that they had moved their kids, and so I asked, was there anything we could have done differently? And in that case, there was not anything we could have done differently. Our exit surveys do sometimes show where we could do something differently. So there are circumstances where the needs of the individual student might be different, and there's nothing that we could do or change, and then sometimes there are. So back to Mike's comment about what's within our control, we have to understand that. And we also have to be cognizant that no matter what decision we make, it may draw some more, and it may cause some more to leave. It goes back to, you made the comment during COVID, depending on which neighbor and which side, they would make a choice for a different reason. So I think from a board perspective, we have to be very clear on what the values are for the district. High expectations, high support, high achievement for our students. How do we make that happen across all of our schools? I think you start with that and then you work backwards. And then the other thing Margaret's been working on this year, in addition to attendance, is open enrollment. So we would historically, people would follow the timeline and put in for open enrollment, but decisions were made much later in the process. And starting at the end of last year and then all through this year, Margaret's been on top of the principals to say, we got to go through those open enrollment requests and get them in as quickly as possible. That way parents know that they're accepted into Scottsdale, they can plan accordingly, versus sitting on a wait list until just before school starts in August, and then they've already made another decision. So I think we've changed procedurally in a way that's going to help us capture more of the open enrollment possibilities.
Margaret, can I put you on the spot just on an overview of what are your experiences and thoughts as you have led this charge?
Well, one of the things I always say in cabinet, what gets measured gets done. Half of on our way to kind of work on this problem was that who's watching? We need to be watching. We need to be watching attendance. We need to be watching enrollment, and we need to hold people accountable. And again, I want to compliment Human Resource, Dr. Cruz and Dr. Lugo. We are watching those class sizes every day to see if our staffing is matching what our enrollment is.
Beyond the 2 times a year.
And also, Christine Harrington's department also has helped us all with marketing, to turn us all to become ambassadors. And one of the things I heard at the board retreat was when the facilitator says, if you really want to know what's going on, ask somebody what their friends are saying.
I loved that.
And that is so true. So we need to see, what are their friends saying? Why are they going to such and such school? And somebody, I can't remember, somebody said, kids go where their friends go. And so we need to really do the research, but most of all, holding people accountable, because enrollment, when we have our principals meeting, we say, don't be smug thinking because your enrollment's high that your school's okay. Dr. Menzel says, team one. So if we have high enrollment at Cherokee and we don't have high enrollment at Echo or Pima, we're all team one. We need to work together, because I always tell them there's such a thing as changing boundaries, if that's what we need to do. So again, it's about educating our ambassadors to sell our schools. And also, we as a district office, the GEICO, our eyes are watching you. What are you doing? And we do a lot of research and a lot of sharing with, like, Sequoia Elementary. When you look at their enrollment, you look at the principal, she's a master of selling her school. And she really reels in those parents, and so we're looking at all the trends of what's working. But somebody else said here, the principal's the real key. They have to be unicorns. So that's it.
Thank you. Any other staff comments to share? Christine?
Yeah, I would just echo what Margaret said. And in fact, at the beginning of the school year, especially ahead of the SUSD Expo, we did a lot of work with our principals as far as professional development, focusing on the brand identity versus that brand perception and what it is. And perception is reality. I mean, we need to do what we can to make the best brand ambassadors. They are our students. They are our parents. They are our teachers who have that lived experience, way better than the prettiest ad in the world. But that branding and the layered approach and taking our tours and being able to walk through our campuses, to be able to walk through our classrooms, to see the engaged teaching and learning, we find that's where the connection is really made. And we see that even in our marketing campaigns. The number of clicks that our newly designed website is receiving, and then additionally the number of tours, those have shot through the roof as a result of this work. And again, it's then honing in on the message, the culture, the climate, being able to talk to the curriculum and answer the questions, and be able to provide sort of a glimpse into what it is to be an SUSD student at Cochise or Cherokee, Cheyenne, Tonalea, you name it. But that's where we've really put a lot of our effort, especially at the beginning of the school year ahead of the expo, so that everybody was primed and ready to have those conversations ahead of the open enrollment period.
Shannon, I just was going to grab you because you were just pointing?
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will piggyback on what Ms. Cernett and Ms. Harrington just said. And, you know, when you come into a school as a parent and you're taking a tour, what is that first impression? How do you feel? And what is the experience of that tour? And when you mentioned the principal that has the tour down packed, are able to bring students in, that's so important. And then you have to deliver on what you presented. And I'm a person of my word, so, you know, if we're saying we're gonna deliver something, we need to do that. And I think that that will make a huge difference as well, so.
100%. Dennis, anything to add? Shannon? Oh, well, we're looking forward to your chart. Okay. All right, are we ready to continue?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so these next two slides get into where our students live by learning community. So at the top left-hand side is the Arcadia Learning Community. The darkest part of each bar shows the percentage of resident students at the school. This isn't capture rate, this is looking at the enrollment at the school and where those kids live. So a resident student is one who lives in Scottsdale boundaries and attends school in their attendance area. The next part of the bar are the students considered as in-district open enrolled, abbreviated as OE for open enrollment. An in-district OE student lives in Scottsdale boundaries and attends another school in Scottsdale rather than the one in their attendance area. Finally, there are the out-of-district OE students who live outside of Scottsdale boundaries and attend an SUSD school. Schools that are 100% open enrollment schools without an attendance area are marked with a star. Those schools are Echo Canyon, Pueblo, Cheyenne, and Scottsdale Online. For further clarification, for example, at Arcadia High School, which is the first bar on the top left, 47% of the student population comes from within the attendance boundary, with 46% of students enrolling from outside the district. At Hopi Elementary, 82% of the student population comes from within the boundary, with only 11% of students enrolling from outside the school district. Seeing no questions, I'll keep going.
I paused.
Nope,
just for
I'll
a second,
pause.
Because I was looking at two slides. The schools, again, with open enrollment, no attendance areas are starred, and I heard Echo Canyon, and I see Pueblo and Cheyenne. Did I get them all?
You did, but there's also Seoul, which is not on these slides because they do not live they're not housed in a learning community. Scottsdale Online Learning, they're just not represented here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, you know, a lot of this is geography, right? If you're closer to a border, it seems, I'm just looking at the schools here, it's where you are geographically, and if you're near the edge of the SUSD borders, you're kind of
Somewhat.
picking from the
Well,
across
I
the
talk
line.
myself in circles on this. Like, at first,
Yeah, this is
at
a
first
great-
I thought a school that has a high percentage of attendance is a successful school, or that's a positive indicator, because it means that you are, assuming that there's a fixed amount of open enrollment that can come in, it means that your seats are being filled up by people in your attendance zone, and therefore you have less ability to take in. But then conversely, schools that have large percentages of people choosing to go to them from outside the attendance zone, that's a positive indicator, because
Something
people are
growing.
choosing to go to them. So I really, yeah, I don't,
So will you walk
know
us
if
through a
there's-
bar?
Sure.
Again, just
well, no, I
pick
think we
your favorite-
understand it.
Well,
I
I'd
mean,
like you to
may
walk
not.
us through a
Yeah,
bar.
but-
Matt understands it.
Sorry. I didn't mean to.
And I believe I understand it, but I'd like you to walk us through a bar.
Okay, so which school do you want to choose on this?
I don't care.
Okay, so let's look at Chaparral, top right. I have to be able to see the numbers. Okay,
Yes.
55, thank you, percent of the students are students that live in the Chaparral boundaries are assigned to attend Chaparral. 18% are in-district open enrolled, which means they're students that are zoned for probably Desert Mountain or Saguaro or Coronado or Arcadia potentially, but mostly Desert Mountain, that are choosing to attend Chaparral instead of Desert Mountain. The last part, 27%, are students that don't live in Scottsdale at all and are choosing to to attend Chaparral.
So feeder school kids, and this is about retention of students in a feeder system, I would imagine are proportionately aligned to their feeder elementaries, but we don't know that just yet. Do we?
No,
We don't know that, okay. And I know I have to add this to the variables. Sports program scholarships has been said to me many times by parents for high schools,
that they'd like that?
that they go to a school because of a coach or a program or a successful record. Yeah, so I don't know where we get that, because that just feels like a wonky ask, but it is a truth to address. I don't know how to ask it. Thank you for taking me through a bar.
What do you mean it's a wonky ask, that people want sports and
Well, you know, maybe,
extracurriculars?
say that again?
That people want sports and extracurriculars.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, the girls' basketball team yields 12 scholarships a year, so I want my daughter to go there.
She's not saying it's a wonky ask the parents do that. She's saying it's a wonky ask to figure out how that
How to ask
causes
it
some schools to be more
methodologically.
popular
I'm
than other
stumped
schools.
a little,
Yeah.
because it's a good ask. Yeah, I just,
My family was that, so my,
Yeah.
yeah.
not a judgment on the parents' part, just a,
No, I mean,
how do
it's
we,
what
can we?
That
Yeah.
is, that is why kids go from charters to public in high school, and that's why we see the numbers trend up in ninth grade, like
For
you
athletics
discussed.
and clubs, yeah,
Now,
Especially if they're rendering scholarships for their kids.
yeah.
related to the feeder schools that go into the high schools, when a family is in our middle schools and it's time to register for high school, is it correct that everybody's highly encouraged to apply and turn in their registration form for the high schools, regardless of their choice of going somewhere else at that point?
They are matriculated up to the high schools automatically by our office, my office.
Okay.
So we roll all the Cocopah and Copper Ridge eighth graders over to Chaparral, and then it's up to the families to disenroll or unenroll.
Okay,
So,
gotcha. Okay,
yeah.
that's good information.
So no one has to apply for high school if they're already in our system. If you're at Ingleside, we already assigned you to Arcadia for next year.
Right, but you have to register.
You don't have to register.
You don't have to, okay, so there was an email that went out encouraging, I think it was Cocopah students to complete a form, register. I refer to this register, may not be the accurate.
So there's an
verbiage.
annual verification process where we ask families, are you coming back next year? And we ask them to verify their address for the next year purposes.
Okay.
And so that probably is what email went out from Cocopah. It wasn't a full registration process, but we're basically saying, can you let us know now if you're not coming, so we know we want our numbers to be cleaner for next year.
Okay, thank
Because,
you.
yeah, a lot of times we don't know who's not showing up until August.
Thank you.
Just for the discussion, I've been moved by the Phoenix Union School District system that has its boutique schools. And we're playing with some, and I don't have a sense of the draw. So if Coronado has the fire program, then we got 24 students, which-ish. I don't know where we study that for those kind of boutique programs, but it might be a good ask. I know that in Phoenix Union, and I don't have the data in front of me, but I feel like they grew in their enrollment, and it was very specific to the boutique programs. Just something to keep playing with. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's just a reminder that sometimes you don't want to just ask why people leave, you also want to ask why they stay.
Why they stay and why they come.
And you get a lot of good information on why people stay.
So we're about halfway through.
I'll ask fewer questions.
All right, so this is the same information presented on the previous slide at the top. These are the Desert Mountain Learning Community, what their enrollment looks like, and what Saguaro's Learning Community looks like. Overall, looking at the bottom left-hand part, oh, shoot, sorry, thank you. I always do that. All right, thank you. All right, so again, Desert Mountain Learning Community on the top left, Saguaro Learning Community on the top right. Looking at Scottsdale overall, 50% of students live in Scottsdale and attend their school of residence. This isn't capture rate, these are just based on actual enrollment. So our enrollment is 50% of students are Scottsdale residents. 27% of students, actually it's more than that. 50% of students live in Scottsdale and attend their school of residence. 27% of students live in Scottsdale and attend another Scottsdale school. So that's our in-district open enrollment. And finally, 22% of students live outside of Scottsdale and attend an Scottsdale school. Students residing in 43 non-Scottsdale school districts attend Scottsdale schools. It might be 1 or 2 kids, but we have kids from 43 separate districts attending schools at Scottsdale. The top district of residence here obviously is Scottsdale. Students are attending Scottsdale schools, 76%. Paris Valley School District, approximately just over almost 7.3%. Looking at students, the next highest is Creighton/Phoenix Union students are attending here, 3.64%. Balts to Phoenix Union, I'm using both terms because those are elementary districts and high school districts are separate. 3.41%, and then Mesa, and then Fountain Hills and Tempe. And then the subsequent districts, again, are just a few students from various districts. Okay. Thank you. All right, and I'm gonna let Christine talk for a minute and give myself a break.
Well, with the new design, development, and deployment of our new website in July, a lot of thought was put into the marketing of our schools, telling of the story, because for the most part, we found that the folks that are coming to our website are those that are school shopping. It's what we link in all of our advertising, our marketing, our flyers and such. And so we really wanted to make it as user-friendly as possible to connect parents with what the best opportunity is for their student based on their grade level. And so we've driven a lot of traffic to tours and the opportunity for tours in e-blasts and social media ads. And additionally, it's just prevalent on our website. And our tours numbers have just shot through the roof. And we're collecting so much data on not only the number of people who are requesting tours, but also where they're coming from. And as such, because every day I ask Stephen for another data point, he's like, can I just build a dashboard? Of course you can. And because we do not have a CRM tool, what we have is somebody who is a lifelong learner over there and looking to how we can optimize our resources, really learn and leverage tools that are already at our fingertips, like Access, like Microsoft Access, Power Automate, Bookings, help streamline some of these systems also for our sites. So Arcadia, for example, is already using Bookings to help alleviate some of the work that comes with scheduling tours and then following up, because we'd like to be able to automate all of the additional thank yous, and then also really track the additional follow-ups with the families to see if there's any additional questions we can answer for them. Again, thank them for touring, but essentially try to close the deal and get them to enroll. So just so far, since July 1, we've had 3,569 tours. Now, we don't have 3,569 new enrollees, clearly, but what we found is that our tours are as much a retention strategy as they are a recruitment strategy. So there are a lot of people who are already in the trajectory to go, for example, myself, with my daughter going from Pueblo to Mojave, we were already in the system, but, touring the middle school to see what comes next, just even for gaining a level of comfort. And so what we're trying to ascertain is really who these families are and start to pull back the onion on, are they people that are already in our system and would be going to the next place already? Are they then looking at multiple middle schools in our system? For kindergarten, for example, we know families are checking out a multitude of schools sometimes. And so it's been really interesting and fun to pull back the onion, and then additionally to dig into the data to get some further insights that are going to make us better at understanding how it is that folks are choosing SUSD. And you can see when they tell us if they're a district resident or from outside and how they're hearing about us. So number one there is word of mouth. And it kind of speaks to what we were speaking about earlier, is it is the neighbor, it's the fence talk, it's the sideline talk with their kids, and it's where their friends are going, certainly. And so really how we build those brand ambassadors and focus on our brand identity, which is what we want to control, but also our brand image and how it is that we really nurture that out in the community. We're also looking at a new product that would be new to us, which is Zapier, which would help connect some of the dots between data sets that live in other systems that aren't currently connected, for example, like K-12 Insight. So we'd be able to help learn more from some of our customer insights and hopefully then be able to better act on them.
Okay. So when we looked at changes in overall enrollment over time earlier in the presentation, this slide depicts the changes by grade level band. Our elementary grades had the greatest peak in the data and are now trending lower over time. Middle school enrollment has steadily declined over the time period on the slide, while high school enrollment held relatively steady until the past 5 years when it started to go down. Looking at this information broken out by grade band and learning community, so considering that the high school line on these slides is basically, it's one high school. Each learning community is listed up here. I will point out that we forced changes in enrollment during the pandemic year, 2020, 2021, where our elementary students that wanted to stay in synchronous learning online were all assigned to Echo Canyon for the spring semester of 2021, which is why you see a spike in an elementary enrollment in Arcadia Learning Community and a decrease in elementary enrollment in every other learning community at that point in time. That's an anomaly. The rest of it is kind of on trend that you can see. Arcadia High School enrollment has gone up over time a little bit to the most current year. Chaparral is declining, and then we see some ups and downs in other areas too. Saguaro also has seen some, so the Saguaro Learning Community elementary students we've seen some increases in that learning community as well.
Okay, I just would like a moment to go through Coronado.
Yep.
Would you walk us through a trend line at Coronado?
Elementary school enrollment in the Coronado Learning Community has gone down from 2014, 2015. It was a high of about 1,750. Right now, it's under 1,200. So
At Coronado?
in the elementary schools. So that's the
That's all
elementary.
the feeders of
It's all the feeders, so that would
Coronado.
be
Okay,
Hocum, Pima, and Yavapai, thank you.
yeah.
Middle school is Tonawea. Yeah, go ahead.
Do these generally, I don't know Scottsdale as well as I would like to, do these generally align with going back to the demographic side of things? So are we generally seeing fewer younger families in Coronado and more in Arcadia?
Or an aging homeowner.
Or,
Yeah,
yeah,
same question,
conversely.
yeah.
Or it's hard to eyeball.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that even there's some new builds in the Coronado Learning Community. They're like very high-end apartments that people are renting, so I'm not sure we're really drawing students from those populations.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Anything else? Do you guys want to comment on this area? Keep going? Everybody's quiet?
Good read.
Okay. Okay, so this finally, for me, this is the projected elementary school enrollment by learning community. This is based on the Applied Economics report from the fall of 2022, based on 40th day enrollment over time. That's the way that these studies are run. So these predictions were generated 3 years ago. I think the nature of the changing things especially with ESAs being expanded to every family right now in Arizona, could impact some of these predictions. And so I think I want to say, interpret these with caution. I think they could be higher than what we're going to realistically see. So for that, elementary school enrollment by learning community was projected back in 2022 to be going down in every community, and that might be something to do with our declining number of students in the area. The highest point was looking at Arcadia Learning Community. Actually, it was Chaparral and Desert Mountain were predicted to be the lowest number of elementary students going forward into 2029, 2030 at that point in time. Looking at middle school, this is the same idea, just looking at middle school enrollment by learning community. Here it was predicted that middle school grade level enrollment in Arcadia and Saguaro learning communities would increase, but that the Coronado learning community would stay the same, and that there would be decreases in the Chaparral and Desert Mountain learning communities.
From a methodology standpoint, since this is from the demographer, things like competition, you said ESA, competition from charters, those aren't really accounted for here. This is purely demographic trends. Do you know if that's the methodology?
He does include the charters when he does these reports, so he does look at that. Go ahead.
He looks at charters, he looks at housing developments and redevelopments and things that are in the pipeline based on what's been approved or contemplated, so he'll have some of that. The ESAs were not in existence the last time he did a study for us, so that would be the outlier in terms of at least what's taken into consideration.
We're getting all those good Axon apartments now. That'll bump us up.
And finally, the high school projected enrollment. This is one where I really think there's projection for Chaparral, just looking at the current numbers we have at Chaparral High School. But at that point in time, the predictions were Saguaro and Chaparral would continue to grow in enrollment, but the other three high schools would decrease.
We might be getting full.
We're tired.
Yeah.
So the one thing, it just causes me to wonder again, and it's not a decision point tonight, but it takes a while for Rick to put together a demographic study. And so the question would be for future consideration, either on the May 13th agenda or later, is that something we want to do now, even though we're making decision points? I mean, some decisions have already been made, but if we're going to make decisions down the road about buildings being open or closed by the end of this calendar year, it might be helpful to have that updated before then. So that might be something that we want to think about. Is it time sensitive? And if so, then our team needs to work on that.
And it's usually a 4 to 6 month process, I think.
It takes a chunk of time.
Since we've used them multiple times, do you know, as part of the report, what we got right and what we got wrong?
It's really hard to tell with the charter schools and where those are going to land.
Just
Yeah.
from what they deliver to us, is that a section in the report? Since they've
Of
done
what
it
they got
year
right
over
and
year?
what-
Get a backward glance in
Yeah.
terms of
No.
how accurate were they? No, he hasn't done that.
He has not done
But
that.
it could be put in the proposal.
It could be, yeah, that is something we could ask for, as what, what did you have in the past and where have we been, to see what it looks like. I have looked at what did he say was gonna happen, what happened. Some schools are pretty close and some schools are not close, is what you'll find. But we could absolutely add into the proposal, we want to see, a glance back at what you did and how does that fit with what actually happened.
All right. You doing trends from exit surveys?
I am.
Okay.
So I'm going to take the mic from my friend Dr. Bachna and talk a little bit about trends that we noticed from exit surveys. And so what you're going to see in the next few slides are some visualizations that really represent some of the written feedback along with some of the selections that people make on our exit surveys. And so what you can see is over the past 3 years, knowing that this year is not yet complete. And so every time we're thinking about this year, we know that there's still a couple of months left of surveys to deploy and information to gather back as we go forward. But we are roughly sending around between 1,200 and 1,900 surveys to families that withdraw. And then we have represented just the number of survey responses that we have received. And so that's just marked by the response rate that we get. Within this first slide, what you're going to notice over each year is we ask families to identify the types of schools chosen. Where are you headed when you hit the road from Scottsdale Unified School District? Thank you for the previous feedback around potentially asking them specifically, like a name of a school. There's elements in the survey that I think we can elevate moving forward. But at this time, what we're asking is really specifically to public schools, charter, private, faith-based, online, and homeschool. So I'll just pause there for a moment, and any questions that you may have specifically related to that trend.
Why don't you walk us through the bar trend of at least one of the
Well,
years?
I just want to talk a little bit about the homeschool trend, because that's not unique to Scottsdale. One of the things from a national perspective is that the projected number of homeschool families is going to continue to increase for the next decade. And so when you see that, I mean, going from 8.6 to 16.4, just in that 1 year with our sample size, that's a pretty big jump, but that's consistent with some of the other trends we're seeing across the state and nation.
Do we know why people are choosing homeschool over? I mean, that's a pretty big jump, what you're saying. So nationally, is there a specific thing that's saying, no, I'm going, is there a specific item that you could drill down to and say, this is why they're choosing it more?
I haven't analyzed the data to this capacity, but we ask a question about, are you accepted in ESA? And we also ask the question about if you're choosing homeschool, so we might be able to make some conclusions that families are choosing to take the ESA voucher and use it for homeschooling.
But, I mean, sorry, even beyond that, yes, there's the ESA, but is it because they wanted flexibility to travel as a family because their parents have that flexibility? Is it because of curriculum? Is it because of fears of being on a camp? That's what I don't know, my wonder, sorry.
It's a good one. Elements of choosing homeschooling.
To that point, I think you mentioned this before, with the next slide of why they're leaving, we know for those who are going to homeschool, we would have the predominance of their reasoning, so we could back into,
Right.
say, that.
I think we can back into some of that, and I think it would be worthy of further exploration as well. Some of my wonderings are around open educational resources, the ability of families today to provide an education in their home environment, within realm of alignment to state standards. Access to resources is very different potentially than it has been in the past, just given what's available in the marketplace that's open. So that would be one of my wonderings as well.
Is another way to say that homeschool is not a monolithic thing, it's a continuum.
Right.
There are people homeschooling that are participating in online curricula, and it might feel actually more like a school that's just being directed from home, all the way to the family that's creating the lesson plans and
Or
Yep.
the group
completely
families
on
that
their own.
come together,
Yeah.
the micro.
But presumably, it's also a place where concerns over curricula and other,
Absolutely.
issues are being indexed as well.
And I also think COVID showed us how good it is to be with our kids and saw that we could do it, families can do it, and it's an option for them. So I think a lot of it stems from COVID.
The question that I emailed you, I was surprised by the percentage of people choosing public school, since we are a public school. And part of what I guess is that since the largest reason people are leaving on slide 30 is moving out of the area, I wonder if a large percentage of the people choosing public school are, I'm going to California or New Mexico or Colorado, and I'm planning to go to a public school there. So it might be more useful to look at this factoring out those that are leaving somewhere else to get to the closer question of people who are still in this area, where are they going? Because am I the only one? I'd be surprised if 30% of people leaving us are going to PV schools.
No, they're not. So when
Yeah.
we look at the other data set, we are a net winner in the school of choice environment. We get more of theirs than they take of ours. So, yeah, I think that's fair.
Nanny, nanny, boo-boo.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that those are fair wonderings, ways for us to look at the data and potentially ways for us to incorporate new asks when we're sending surveys over time. Are there other granular questions we would want to seek from families? On the next slide, if we're ready to move in, this really trends some of the open source. Families have the opportunity to type specifically some of their reasons for leaving, why they're hoping to go. And so this data set really just demonstrates, again, some of the moving out of the area, different reasons that families may have indicated through their comments why they are departing.
Leah, can I ask on that? Numbers wise, so if there were 400 surveys received for 23, 24, I'm assuming not all 400 filled out this answer. So I'll pick a number in 23, 24, 10% for academic rigor. That's not 40 people.
Correct. That would not
10.
be 40 people. And so Dr. Bachman and I did spend some time trying to reverse engineer specifically from the match of parent comment to specific choice. And it's just something we would need a little bit more time in order to get all the way down into that.
Right.
And,
Because
and
of
they
that,
could choose multiple reasons that wouldn't, they
Okay.
didn't have a singular option. They could choose 3 of these.
But if it's not, and, there's 400 was the high water mark in 23, 24, I want to be conscious of the absolute numbers, because some of these bars could be 5 people. Correct. I want to make sure we're not saying, oh, look at that bar, how big it is, but in reality, and so, this is always a sensitive area. Like, yeah, there's data, but what are the actual numbers? I like this because this is people telling us, and not quite saying, if you asked your neighbor, why would they say you left our school? So not quite the same thing, but they are telling us directly. And, I don't think anyone's gonna be surprised by the reasons. I would like to understand if we're on the same page collectively that these sort of are the scope of reasons, or if anyone feels like there are ones that are left out and like, oh, this, I can't believe this, there's gotta be some other thing, or maybe it's buried inside of one of the things, like, the bathroom thing is buried inside of safety concerns or something. So that's important, because I think if we keep going back to this, what are we trying to do, what can we accomplish? I think if there's differences on why, that's going to be challenging going forward.
I remember sadly losing a few folks, and it was about a staff disagreement, and I didn't know where that might live on a withdrawal. I think there is a pulse of that I had a fight with one of the staff members, and we just couldn't settle it, and I left out, it
Customer service.
happens, absolutely.
We see that in their verbatim response, but they also are typically checking one of these boxes.
Okay,
And-
there it
And
is.
so we have multiple ways to catch it, but the verbatim response is pretty telling, because they'll get granular.
Sure.
Okay.
These are the exact options they have to click, or
No, there's more than this.
there's more than that?
I thought.
Could we get a copy of the exit survey? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
But just want to pause on that. Like, does anyone think that there are
What's
reasons
missing?
not covered here? Because I think that's important.
So there's an other category in each one of these where, so if they didn't feel like one of these fit for them, they can click other, and sometimes they'll do both, and then they'll identify something specific. What we haven't seen so far, at least, is the need for another category based on those others. So if we had seen a trend where, this is a common theme in the checking the other box, we would have added another category. I don't think we've seen that yet in the conversations we've
Are
had.
you doing the coding on it, Cindy?
Yeah, I worked on it.
Okay.
Well, Amy proposed one, which is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the curriculum, how would you describe concerns over the curriculum?
I think we all got the exit survey. Sorry. We all got the exit survey results, so if you take the time to read through there, I think might help us also come up with, because you can read in there, people do talk about that. They talk about the curriculum in there. I think that probably falls under, they probably mark it under academic rigor. I don't know if we could add academic rigor and, I don't know.
And what, curriculum or text?
I think those
resources?
are distinct ideas, that would be useful separating and understanding.
Yeah, because it's definitely noted in those exit surveys.
Karen, did you add that?
Scottsdale Unified is selling a product, which is what we put out for students to consume. And taking a look at what product we're putting out, and do parents want the product that we're selling, essentially, is something to look at. And I think curriculum's very broad, And when you break it down to what is the product of that curriculum, we'll probably get a better idea of what it is.
Did you feel like you understood what was being asked? Okay.
Can I add one more thing? I don't know if it was Amy or Karen, but someone suggested that we make sure, because previously we weren't sending the exit surveys to families that still had kids in the school district. It was you. And we changed that. And it's been good, because we're realizing, wow, a lot of people are only choosing to remove one student from our school district, but they have other students still here. So it's been great to capture that information on the survey.
I have a question. Is there something we can do to better capture, the information from people? Because we get so many emails, right? And if you don't really care, why would you take the time to do this? We need to make them care, and even if that's a call from someone at the school, because why would you? And, you know what I mean? They don't understand the importance of it, and we need to help them understand that.
Agreed.
I think it's a great high school business marketing classroom. No, seriously, I think if we were a university, we would use our current students to call alums
sad
and
project.
to do that. I think this is a great student project to activate them against, and it's going to create something great for college and for work, and someone's more likely to answer, probably, a current student reaching out.
I would love to see these same bars on the why I stay, especially the long term.
And then this final slide that you see here really is to the point of our parents do type specific reasons, and as you go through and synthesize, you are able to pull individual kernels, you're able to pull some trends, and so we were able to synthesize through some of the correlations between the different concerns that were typed in, and these three really surfaced as the predominant trends just based on the, not anecdotal, but what was written by the respondents. And so we did notice that technology overuse is correlated to academic rigor concerns. And so that the comments related to that, those were connected to each other. Discipline and policy enforcement was correlated to bullying safety concerns, maybe how those are handled. You can see in those exit surveys, you guys received them, really how families are feeling about the policies, the treatment, the enforcement there. And then also lots of special education comments come through and come up, really that the concerns from special education do have a tight correlation with potentially not feeling supported by school administration or things happening at the school site that caused a level of frustration within supports for students with disabilities, and often referenced our IEPs, IEP meetings, and those types of things. Each of these concerns, I think, as they trend and rise, are very important for us to see. And to your point previously, if there are other things we should be sourcing or seeking additional information on, we would be interested in hearing those as well, just so we can also respond. By action, not like here tonight. We could do that too.
Yes, Dennis.
We can all see that we have plenty of capacity in our district to grow. I can end it there, or I can go on. I actually have something that I put together today. I'm not sure if they didn't give me a good slide because they wanted me to just free flow and just take over this place, or if they wanted me to just be quiet and get through this. So take one, pass it along. Capacity from the building services perspective is in the design specific to the fire marshal and egress of our buildings and the capacity of the buildings, and not capacity with students, but capacity of people. So if you are having a family fun night or a teacher conferences, they want to tell us what the capacity of the school is so that we don't overfill it and are not able to exit in the event of emergency. So when we went to Hopi not that long ago, and I shared with them that the capacity of Hopi was 851 people, they about lost their minds. And it was for me to explain to them that that number is important for the purpose of gatherings, okay? So we get capacity data from the health department, how many toilets, how many urinals, how many sinks, and that dictates what our capacity is. We get capacity information from the school facilities board, and they don't really look at any of the specials, any of the resource classes. They only look at square footage and number of bodies of students. So in 2019-20, Dr. Sackos and Dr. Hagigat at the time, Margaret's position, they went through and they really drilled down to program capacity. What do you do in your school? What are all the different things, the different offerings that you have? Do you have Spanish? Do you have LRC? Do you have ELL? Do you have all the different alphabets of supporting students? And they did a really nice job, and they came up with the numbers that applied back then. That work needs to be redone, and I believe we've got plans to do that again, because programs do change. Gifted was once at Hopi, then it got moved over to Tavon, and then Gifted grew back at Hopi. And so there's a lot of things that have to be considered when we talk about capacity. Since Hopi was the subject of a little bit of consternation recently, I did this little exercise for Anne over there, and really the ideal number for her school is 660. And when we design schools, back when I started in 95, when we designed schools, it was really, really easy. We took 6 grade levels, we multiplied it by 4 classrooms, we multiplied that by 25, boom, there's your school. And not much more than that. It wasn't nearly as complex as it is today, where we sit in visioning committee meetings and we talk about every offering that that school has today, and then try and design looking forward to what they may do in the future. But if you go to a program like Hohokam, where we have the 6 schoolhouses, kindergarten through 6th grade or 5th grade, and each schoolhouse has 4 dedicated classrooms, a mid-size room for whatever resource they're teaching, 2 smaller rooms and 1 really small room that's really just an office. That was the model that we used to figure out how we were going to take care of all of the different things that happen. Because if you just fill every single classroom, which is what's happening at Hopi right now, you have no place for the other things. And so you have to reduce that student body somewhat to be able to take some of those classroom spaces and subdivide them. Another example is at Navajo. We held off and we did not build out the D building, thank you, Dr. Menzel, and we waited. And then they started to fill back up, their population grew, and then we determined what their needs were. And so that D building that was once 10 full classrooms turned into only 4 classrooms, a cool-down space because they have just a small PE room, and then multiple spaces for the different resource folks that are there. So a classroom can be turned into a 900 square foot classroom, can be turned into 3 different size spaces for those resource folks, OT, PT, LRC, ELL. Yes, Matt?
So I understand the complexity of thinking about kind of a school by school. If you imagine like a bar graph and we're at percent of capacity, I understand it's non-trivial to think about kind of what 100% looks like in terms of the number of students. But just maybe zooming out, since we're, it's late in the evening. Have we reduced the number of sites since 2007, 2008?
No, we have not.
No. And we're at 75% of the students. So is it fair to say, again, I know how it distributes is complicated, but just as a layperson, the same physical plant 75% of the population, ergo, we have excess capacity. Yeah,
That is fair to say.
yeah.
Yeah, we do. So Kiva, when it was originally built in the late 50s, it was a K-6. So it was built with more classrooms. When we rebuilt it, we right-sized it, shrunk that school, so it's not a 900 student school anymore. It's more like a 600 to 700 student school, depending on their offerings. So, but to answer your question very specifically, we have plenty of space that needs to be considered what to do with.
But that's a really good correction, thank you. We could have the same number of sites, but in the rebuild process, you know,
Right.
we now use space differently. We've got maker labs and this and that and the other thing. So that's, I appreciate you correcting me on that.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I'll stop there. I could talk about capacity for a long time. As a facilities guy, it drives me nuts to walk through classrooms and see one teacher, 3 kids all day long, and they're in 900 square feet. We have potential savings in electricity, obviously. We have potential savings in custodial cleaning services. There are other savings that we could see by either consolidating the school within itself and saying, this wing is off limits, you cannot go there. But there are amenities in, let's say, Mountainside, for instance. There is a 6th grade wing, a 7th grade wing, an 8th grade wing. And those amenities are in each one of those wings for those grade levels. So you have to be very careful about how you consolidate within the school. You can't take 8th grade and put them in the 7th grade wing and call it good. So there's a lot to consider, and we're gonna really start working on that in earnest, because if we're not consolidating within the school, then we need to consider closing.
And from a budgetary perspective, decisions need to be made by December of this calendar year for something that would be put in motion for 26, 27. So from a backwards planning perspective, December is an important timeline. Are we at closing thoughts?
Yes, we might be at processing rich information we just received, too. Any other immediate comments on the immediate topic of capacity? Okay, I can sense a tired room. All right, what we're going to do is, first of all, staff and Dr. Menzel, thank you for an amazing, rich collection of the data you're already on top of, but that you took extraordinary amount of time to analyze and consider for this discussion. Job very well done. Amazing hours. I'm going to guess 100 or more when I count each person and the people you worked with and the time you spent to prepare for tonight. Thank you very much. Even though it's data you have, it takes time to work through it, to present it, and to put it together. I'm going to ask each board member to reflect on 3 questions, and we'll go around the room and share, so just take a minute to think. What was your greatest takeaway, or 2 or 3 if you have more? What did you learn under that takeaway, or what was verified for you under your takeaway? As you think about what did you walk out the door going, this mattered tonight because I got this out of it. So that's 1. Then I'd like each of us to share, and next, we need to consider the following next steps. What are our next steps? And 1 or 2 would be great. If you have more, fine. And then my third question in closure is, what was helpful about this approach to a study session, and was it valuable for you? Would you like to see this approach continue? So I'll start with Karen and work around counter. I'll skip and go to Amy. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, any information is good information, right? I feel like being on the board for a couple years and paying attention to years prior, I know a lot of this information, it's presented differently, but, so I appreciate the study session, as this is really the first one we've gotten to have. But I would like to see, we didn't touch on private at all, and, I think that information needs to be, especially when it's affecting, I think, Chaparral. Like Notre Dame, that's all I hear about now. And what is their wait list like? And what are, things like that. I think that's information we need.
Great. Was there any particular takeaway that popped out for you? No. No, just the whole thing? Okay, great. All right, Matt?
I think my biggest takeaway is that demographic curve for Scottsdale. I mean, I kind of knew, speaking in business terms, that our market was shrinking, but that was much steeper than I really appreciated. In terms of next steps, I really do think the survival rate is really key to,
Those we keep.
which is start with of the
Survival
100
sounds so.
Well, yeah, I'm using more of like a health research term, but of 100 kids who started in kindergarten,
retain?
how many are there in the senior year? 'Cause I really, at the end of the day, a lot of this question of, are they quitting for this reason and that reason, we might be able, it would look very different if 90% of them are still there, and it would, versus these constant ins and outs. But then the big thing is, which I fully expected and I appreciate, this is a journey, we covered a lot of the what's happening, but not the why. So I think this did reveal the urgency of systematic thinking about the why. Like, to Mike's point, we can't have marketing during tours try to understand using 5 ways of asking about what's important to you, and then ask a family that's leaving the exit survey 5 other ways of formulating what's important to you.
Yeah.
Really thinking systematically across all the different touch points of the why. And then, as we talked about, also why people stay. Because if you only index on why people leave, drop your product, you can sometimes go in a bunch of wrong directions versus where the largest amount of your business is in any year, which is all the people who are actually staying with you, so why they're staying. And then, I forget what your third
The
criteria.
approach to a study
Yeah, I love
session.
this. And probably my favorite part was all of us being around a table, both staff and board members and colleagues, and
Intermixed.
feeling
yeah.
like we're one big group that's all rowing in the same direction. So I really liked
Okay.
this feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Mike?
Similarly, main takeaway, seeing the enrollment drop and seeing the headwinds we have, right? Again, staying away from causality, but, if there's 5 things hitting you in the face, that's causing you to slow down. And so seeing them all there together was helpful, if not apparent before, but it's good to see it that way. Another takeaway, I had mentioned before, the basis Great Hearts, and not focusing on them specifically, but the fact that we don't abandon our students. Like that, I just think is just so core to our identity, and it's hard to bring out, that is our mission and what we do, and I just love seeing that there. Next steps, I had said I could see a similar session going down to a school-by-school level, because that, to me, gets to actionability. There's nothing direct here from that's actionable, and that's not a bad thing. This was a wonderful place to start. It was amazing. But if we start to say, well, then so what and what next? To me, that doesn't happen unless you start getting down specific. And, people in this room know that really, really well. And I think for them, either people here or, principals, to share with us and tell their story, I think will help get us to what can be done. And again, as a board member, I'm not doing it, but I want to know what is being done, and I fully believe people are, but I also believe we could be doing more. And, Margaret's comment about accountability, I think, is a positive one, and that, to me, gets down to that next level. And then what was helpful is getting to consensus. And I don't think we're all ever going to think the same thing, so that's not what I mean, but I think what I'm saying is we're hearing the same data at the same time in the same way. I'd like to think that if we draw different conclusions from the same thing, we're open about it and share, but we have a good level setting point. We can always come back to, hey, remember when we did the study session in April 2025 and we had slide 17 up? That's a good touch point to come back to. I fully believe we'll be doing that over the next months and years, so that's a good thing for us.
Thank you. Karen?
So I think there's, we talked about branding and brand, and when you have a brand like Starbucks, I go to Starbucks because I know what I'm gonna get. So when we put the brand out there, the product has to match it. And so I don't know if our product matches the brand at this time. So my kids were perfect examples of they were gonna go to parochial school, and families said, no, you need to go here. It's better than private school, and it was. So, but the brand matched the product at the time. And that's really what I took away. There's a lot to work. I agree with Board Member Patinsky. We got to the what, but not the why, and I think the why is very important. And, you were a superintendent for a long time. Scott, you've been a superintendent, what, 24 years? And it does amaze me a little bit that you guys don't come in and pinpoint the obvious of why we are in the spot that we are. And we're sitting around, talking and talking and talking, but there are some obvious things that I would kind of expect for you guys to have answers to. And the other thing is, and I know I just called you Scott, it was actually inappropriate of me, I would hope that moving forward, we would actually hold these meetings and address each other in a formal manner and just bring up the standard of the meeting a little bit.
All right, thank you so much. Did you like the study session?
I've always liked study sessions, so,
Okay,
yeah.
great, great. So I have several takeaways, and the conversations have just been so rich tonight. I learned so much about our actual open enrollment attendance areas at some of our schools, 43 separate districts coming into our schools, watching the ESA expansion, the wait lists that are in place. That was really clarifying for me. I enjoyed seeing the youth under 18 or 19 that helped me realize the true end count of what's happening. I do look forward to more why on families giving us a try or families staying with us. I do think the next conversations are going to be about demographics, facilities at a site level or boundaries, as Margaret brought up, right-sizing our schools for efficiencies. So that's kind of where I think we're headed. I like that we're wondering what is and isn't in our control. I think the 5 whys are spot on. I like the idea of a focus group of registrars getting together and telling us what they really know. I think that'll really be insightful if we could just aggregate some registrars' insight. I like the addressing of the speed of open enrollment as a bureaucratic obstacle to overcome. Thank you for bringing that to the table. I overall just think that the teaming that happened tonight was healthy and thoughtful and productive. So I just appreciate the culture shift that's been introduced to study sessions, and thank you very much for accommodating our desire for this depth and honoring the time we wanted to spend in this topic. And I'd like you to finalize any sentences or summarize.
Before, just make a comment. Sorry, Ms. Werner, when you say like the brand is different than the product, that's a great observation. You said there's some obvious things that they could be doing, but when would be an appropriate time to share those? And please, I'm not putting you on the spot, but I feel like it's something left unsaid, and I feel like we can't get to a good point if it's left unsaid. So I would hope there's a place or a time where you could share that, because I want to know, I really do. I value your opinion, and I just feel like it was put out there, and I'm gonna walk away from this and say, I don't know what she's talking about, and that's gonna stick with me. And so, please, I'm not putting you on the spot, but I would hope at some point there's a venue where you could talk about those, and whether it's one-on-one or whether it's here, because I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, I don't know what you're saying.
So Board Member Sharkey, I've had many, many conversations related to the topic with Dr. Menzel, and we just haven't gotten anywhere. And so today would obviously not be appropriate, but it falls in with the why. So when we can put together another meeting with the why, that would be great, and that would be the appropriate time. And I know Dr. Menzel knows what the issue is, and because we've hashed it out many, many times. So there are obvious things, and we should address them. But until we can get the captain of the ship on board, it's challenging.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, in the name of the healthy.
Did I get to say a few things?
I'm almost ready to pivot to the closure. Yes, as we move forward in that healthy manner of conversation and that straightforward addressing of issues, what are you hearing and what's your synthesis?
So there are a number of things. One, I appreciate the opportunity to have a deep dive. I think study sessions are really helpful. And while it's a lot of work for our team, this was not at all wasted work. As we spent the time going through the data, asking the questions and interrogating, there are things that we took away that help us plan for the future. So from that perspective, the team appreciates the chance to do this. I agree. I think a table that's closed like this creates a different kind of conversation than when you have an open-ended U or people are standing doing formal presentations. And so appreciate the fact that it seems that it's resonated well for everyone here. My wonders are, and I don't want my team to shoot me, but I still don't know if we have enough study sessions scheduled because the nature of the next steps, so Mike talked about, Board Member Sharkey talked about drilling down into the next level of the why and building by building, right? That's one thing. The planned next study session for June was to go over our academic achievement data. And that's also a long meeting in and of itself. It's also a wildly important goal, and I don't want to lose that. So I think we should think about what's the right cadence. Do we have enough? And then the third thing is, I worry about June in particular because we have a lot of core business that has to get done. So to do like we did tonight and say we're gonna, I mean, we had one other thing that was time sensitive, but we cleared the deck of anything else. Had many requests for, hey, can we put it on the agenda? And we said no. June's harder to do that in because our study session is the last one in June, which is when we have to approve final budget and all of the rest. So unless we schedule another meeting for that, we are gonna bump up against just the practical reality of we need 2 meetings in June for the work of the board in addition to the study session. And historically, we don't meet in July for obvious reasons, I think. People leave the state in July, it's really hot. You get a break, and then you can get into your normal cadence. So I'm not proposing anything now. I'm just saying that one of my wonders coming out of this, given the nature of the conversation, is if we need to do more, we should think about what that looks like and what the cadence is, and determine at some point whether or not we're going to continue with the plan on academic achievement, which I would recommend, and then figure out when we have the next step on the building by building, because we're not going to lose what we've done tonight. But again, the cadence matters as we're heading into next year.
All right, so we may want to put on the agenda an adjustment to the calendar in the future, and let's all sleep on that and think about it. Sleep was the operative word, because I think we're ready to call it a night. All right, I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you all.